Chapter 1872. Deng Zhang and Bai Wei originally thought that victory or defeat would be on the ancient monsters. Who would have thought that the person behind 1K Starstream would place his chess piece in the anti-world and even try to pull Demon Lord Qizhou into the game? To them, this was a brilliant move. Now, Priest Zhang was fighting against that person from 1K Starstream and couldn't retreat. Otherwise, all their previous efforts would be wasted. The other people of human Dao were using their Dao treasures to suppress them. But if Demon Lord Qizhou sided with them now, it would be enough to break the balance. Compared to this, the outcome of the battle at the myriad fault star streams seemed insignificant. Deng Zhang looked at Qi Yao and the others and asked, "Friends, how is the anti-world?" He was anxious to know what was going on inside, but other than Qi Yao and the other demons from the anti-world, as well as the two people who placed the chess pieces, no one else could see what was going on. Qi Yao told them to wait. After a while, he raised his head and said sternly, "That monster has been killed by Demon Lord Qizhou." Deng Zhang, Bai Wei, and the others were surprised. They looked at one another and then fell into deep thought. For people at their level, things weren't as simple as they seemed on the surface. This was especially so when it came to matters that involved the crux of the matter. Each and every one of their actions had a hidden meaning behind them. That Devil Lord Qizhou had indeed acted as they had expected, but wasn't that also a test? In fact, it could even be considered as an invitation. But who would have thought that Devil Lord Qizhou would be so decisive and immediately kill the ancient monster? It seemed like he had no interest in this. Bai Wei shook his head and said, "I wonder what this Demon Lord Qizhou is thinking. He should be able to imagine that even if he kills the ancient monster, if he doesn't open the barrier between the two worlds and allow the human Dao to investigate, then the human Dao will definitely not let the matter rest. At that time, regardless of whether he is willing or not, he will be forced to go against the human Dao." Deng Zhang said solemnly, "In reality, the moment the monster was sent to the anti-world, he was already involved. Only by working with us is the best plan." Heng Jing thought about it and agreed. Demon Lord Qizhou was the first demon lord in the world. As the person who broke open the door of the two realms, not only did he have the responsibility of guarding the door of the two realms, there were also many karmic connections that even they did not understand. It was absolutely impossible for him to open the door of the two realms. Therefore, as long as the people of Dao refused to retreat, they would eventually walk on the path of confrontation. Ji Su used her divine will and said, "Demon Lord Qi Yao, what do you think?" Qi Yao said playfully, "If Demon Lord Qizhou really fights with a Dao venerate, then that person's intentions will be fulfilled. However, it might not be a bad thing for us." Though Demon Lord Qizhou had never fought with anyone, he was the only demon lord who found his own path. His strength was definitely above the three of them. He privately judged that Qizhou might not be much weaker than Taoist Zhang or even that person. If this person entered their formation, then they might really be able to compete with the people path. In Busha Heaven, after Dan Yi and the other two sensed the monster enter the anti-world, they also calculated the cause and effect. They took this matter very seriously and were ready to immediately go there to deal with it. But before they could move, they received a message from Zhang Yan. Danny thought about it and said, "Since Taoist Zhang has already made arrangements, then we will stay here and not move." Fu Qingming and Michihito Ichido both nodded. Ever since the attack on that world, Zhang Yan had been the one in charge. He had even personally fought against the person behind him. Currently, it was almost at the final juncture. Victory and defeat were about to be decided. Since Zhang Yan said that it was fine, there was naturally no need for him to bother too much. Even if there were some obstacles, as long as it was beneficial to the overall situation, there were still some places that could be compromised. In 1K Starstream, Wei Zihong did not know what was happening in the outer world. He could only try his best to deal with the crisis in front of him. Because there were only two ancient monsters this time, he did not need to stay here to defend. He could go back and meet up with one side to fight against the invading enemy. But which side to support first was a problem. He thought about it carefully and felt that the ones guarding Wuqing Tian were Ao Shao and the other Duju cultivators. Even if their doppelgangers were destroyed, another one would descend and become stronger as the battle went on. Moreover, These people had cultivated for a long time and were experienced. Even if they could not defeat the monsters, they could delay them for a long time. Luo Zhu only had 3 dragon demons guarding it. The restriction formation had been built for the longest time and was the strongest. However, the 3 of them had just now gained intelligence. They might not be able to gain an advantage in front of such ferocious monsters. Therefore, it was most appropriate to return to support them. After making a decision, he immediately steered the palace to Luo Zhu. Because he had considered the shocking power of the ancient monsters, there would definitely be a lot of movement when they fought. Therefore, he wanted to go deep into the void to distance himself from them. Therefore, he was far away from Luo Zhu. Even if he used all his strength, it took him a day. Just now, he had rushed back. Once he reached the land boundary, he saw that the 3 dragon demons had changed back to their original forms. They were fighting between the chaotic realm and the present realm. Because of the battle between the 2 sides, the power spread out and caused the entire heavenly world to fall into a state of confusion. For a moment, he could not tell which side had the upper hand. Those who had not reached a certain level of cultivation in Luo Zhu felt that the world was chaotic. Their bodies were heavy and it was difficult for them to breathe. The heavy sky was pressing down so heavily that they could touch it if they raised their heads. It gave people the feeling that it was about to collapse. Not only that, all the sounds and auras below were dark. The lower generation cultivators seemed to have lost their hearing and were in a daze. They only knew that they were there and did not know what was happening outside. Wei Zihong also felt that his surroundings seemed to be covered by a thick layer of fog. Even though he could distinguish between friend and foe, everything was blurry. The divine eye on his forehead opened and looked into the sky. After a while, he also saw some clues. The 3-headed dragon demon did not fall into a disadvantageous position at this moment. The ancient gods and monsters were definitely not without intelligence like what Qi Zhaolan had said before. Instead, each and every one of their actions were very methodical. This should be the work of the few heretic mighty figures. Although they seemed to be evenly matched, as the battle continued, the dragon demon's aura was clearly weakening. If this continued, as long as they could not defeat their opponent within 10 days to half a month, they would no longer have a chance. The ancient deities obviously also sensed this. Therefore, they were very calm and did not make any move to attack. Wei Zihong was excited. He had come at the right time. He turned around and bowed to a deep pool of water in the hall. He said, "Venerable Xian Wu, thank you for your help to subdue this monster." As soon as he finished speaking, the pool of water stirred. Then, a wave of water flew up and circled in the air. It flew out of the palace and into the battlefield. In the next instant, he collided with the primordial deity. After that, waves of white light appeared in the space, and then it fell into darkness. This scene actually repeated itself in a few breaths of time, as if day and night were constantly changing. Wei Zihong only felt a piercing pain in his divine eye. However, this battle was not something he could visualize. He could only withdraw his gaze and return to the hall to sit down cross-legged. He guarded his mind and waited for the result. After this battle lasted for half a month, he felt that the ancient deity's aura was gradually fading. After another few days, all the strange phenomena gradually faded. The void and the continent gradually returned to their original state. Wei Zihong stood up and walked outside. He saw 3 rays of light descending. The 3 dragon demons turned back into their human forms in the hall. Jiaren stepped forward and bowed. He said, "Sect leader Wei, the deities have retreated. The venerable Xian Wu thinks that it is necessary to kill them. He has already chased them into the chaotic land. He asked us to come back first and wait for instructions." Wei Zihong nodded. He saw that the vitality of the 3 was gradually fading. He asked solemnly, "Can the 3 of you still fight?" Jiaren replied, "Thanks to the help of the venerable Xian Wu, we still have a lot of strength. We can still handle another battle." Wei Zihong said, "There is still no news from the nightmare love sky. It is currently in a stalemate. Please go and help them." Just now, he had already discovered that in the battle with the ancient gods and monsters, those with insufficient cultivation would have their senses weakened to the extreme. Because of this, the transmission of information between the two sides was also cut off. Originally, he could have used his divine will to ask, but considering that in the battle with the ancient gods and monsters, every bit of divine will consumed was important, so from the beginning to the end, he did not use it. Jiaren said, "After this battle, we will go and reincarnate. We will not meet again in the future. I will bid farewell to sect leader Wei first." Wei Zihong said solemnly, "The three of you have contributed greatly this time. I will submit a letter to the Venerable Ones and ask for your merits." When the three of them heard this, they all bowed to him and said, "Thank you, sect leader Wei." Then, they soared into the sky, turned into a ray of light, and pierced through the void, heading towards the grievous emotion heavenly pavilion. Wei Zihong stayed behind to deal with the aftermath. Over 10 days later, the divine beast Black Tortoise returned and told him that the primordial monster that had escaped had been annihilated. When he found out that there was no need to worry about the future, he felt at ease and drove the palace city towards bleak emotion sky. In the 5 heavens, the 5 mighty ones had been watching Busu heaven. However, after waiting for a long time, there was still no movement from the human Tao. Bai Wei was a little surprised. He said, "Could it be that the human Tao has given up on pursuing this matter?" Deng Zhang said in a low voice, "Until now, they still haven't made a move. It seems like this is the case. This can be considered a countermeasure." He thought that from the human Tao's point of view, if the ancient deity landed in the anti-heaven and earth, Lord Qizhou could choose to stand on the side of the mighty one behind 1K, or he could just kill him like just now. These two choices would lead to completely different consequences. It all depended on which one the human Tao was willing to believe. Now, it seemed that he had chosen not to clash with Lord Qizhou. Qi Yao said, "The human Tao sure can keep his composure." If this matter was on their side, then there was no way they could ignore it, and even more so, they wouldn't be vague about it. They would definitely ask clearly and get to the bottom of it. Unfortunately, the Tao Master was extremely calm this time, and as a result, what he hoped for did not happen. Just when everyone was feeling regretful, Deng Zhang suddenly said, "Has everyone thought about it? What if the human Tao already knew about the situation in the anti-heaven and earth? Then everything now makes sense." Chapter 1873. As soon as Deng Zhang said this, everyone's heart skipped a beat because they understood what he meant. At the same time, they also thought of the possible implications behind this. Of course, these were just thoughts in their hearts and could not be proven. Qi Yao shifted his gaze and looked over. His gaze stopped on Deng Zhang for a moment and he said, "Exalted Lord Deng, are you implying that Demon Lord Qizhou is secretly in contact with the human path?" Deng Zhang said plainly, "I did not say that. It is just a possibility." Qi Yao chuckled and waved his hand, "Exalted Lord Deng, there is no need to avoid it. Although we are from the same source as Demon Lord Qizhou, we are not on the same path. Otherwise, if we had his help, we would not have been forced to this state by the human path." He paused for a moment. "However, I don't agree with your words. I'm afraid you don't know the capabilities of Demon Lord Qizhou. This person has already found his own Tao path. He only cares about his own Tao and has no other thoughts. Therefore, he doesn't need the jade of origin of Zhou. He can be said to have no desires and no demands. Why did he secretly conform to the human Tao?" Deng Zhang was expressionless. He did not agree nor refute. Bai Wei thought about it and said that Taoist Zhang's cultivation is now profound. He has many mystical techniques that we are unable to fathom. If he could see through the reality of the anti-heaven and earth, then this matter would make sense. Deng Zhang said slowly, "I have also thought about what Guangxing Tianzuan said, but it is impossible. That Taoist Zhang's cultivation might be profound and he could see through the secrets of heaven and see the changes in the future. But 1K can also disturb the secrets of heaven. Therefore, he should not be able to confirm the specifics. Moreover, if that person made a move, why would he leave behind such a huge flaw?" Bai Wei nodded and sighed. "If the human path moves, then everything will be alive. But now, we are walking on the right path. That person's plan has been broken again." Qi Yao said, "I do not need to think about this. We have done what we can. As for what happens next, that person will worry about it. In the 1K void, when Wei Zihong and the others arrived at Nightmare Emotion Sky, it was already 3 days later. The situation here was similar to what Luo Zhutian had seen. It was also unclear, and it was difficult to sense what was happening outside. He opened his divine eyes and looked at the battle in front of him. He was slightly relieved. Even though these ancient gods and monsters had obtained intelligence and were much more difficult to deal with than before, they similarly didn't possess that chaotic and ferocious impulse. They knew how to protect themselves first before taking down their opponents. Thus, up until now, this battle was still at the stage where both sides were probing each other, and it was far from the end. He thought about it for a while and sent a message to the Black Tortoise. He wanted to ask the Black Tortoise to help immediately, but after some communication, he decided not to do anything for the time being. This was because this ancient god monster was extremely special. Not only was it naturally cunning, it was also very proficient in the Tao of concealment. If the divine beast Black Tortoise were to approach it now, it would feel that it was no match for it and would very likely flee. This was a god monster that had already entered the world once. In the future, as long as it was willing, it could come back anytime and anywhere. Even though this would cause quite a commotion and the cultivators could take precautions in advance, it would still be a big problem. Thus, it was best to find a way to kill it this time. The Black Tortoise didn't need to do anything now. It only needed to wait for the crucial moment to attack, and there would definitely be a chance for it to succeed. This battle lasted for another 10 days. Both sides felt that they had probed each other enough, and only then did they unleash their true abilities. For a time, the sky was dark and gloomy, and everything was silent. Only rainbow-colored lights flashed from time to time in the void. Another 10 days passed, and the battle between both sides reached its most intense moment. After all, Ao Xiao and the others had the help of magic treasures, and they gradually gained the upper hand. However, this ancient god monster didn't show any signs of fighting to the death. Instead, it seemed like it was going to retreat. Just as it was suppressed by a ray of light, it slid away from the encirclement as if it was shedding its skin. Then, its enormous body suddenly shrunk to the size of a speck of dust. It looked like it would return to the chaos realm in an instant. However, at this moment, a wave of water rose from the Nine Heavens Palace and instantly reached the void, enveloping the ancient god monster. The divine beast Black Tortoise had seized the opportunity and joined the battle. When Wei Zihong saw the divine beast Black Tortoise joining the battle, he assumed that this battle would be over. After waiting for a few more days, the sounds outside gradually calmed down. He couldn't help but stand up. At this moment, several rays of clear light appeared in the hall. Ao Xiao, Qiu Chong, and Chen Li appeared in front of the steps. Wei Zihong took a step forward and asked, "May I ask everyone, how is that god monster?" Qiu Chong cupped his hands and said, "This god monster is very cunning. I thought that it would escape in the end. Fortunately, we have the Black Tortoise Venerable to help us suppress it. I believe that we will succeed in a few days." Wei Zihong's spirits rose slightly as he said, "I've destroyed these two ancient gods monsters. It will take at least 2 to 3 years for them to come again. At the very least, there shouldn't be any obstacles in front of us for the next few years." At this moment, Qiu Chong said, "Everyone, don't you think that they didn't go all out in this attack? It seems like their real target isn't us." Ao Xiao said, "Then perhaps this is just a test? To see how much strength we have hidden?" Qiu Chong nodded and said, "That's a possibility. However, given the current situation, if there are no obstacles in our way, we will be able to march forward and destroy the remaining forces. Instead of testing them, it would be better for them to stake everything on one throw. Perhaps they can stop us from advancing." Wei Zihong had also thought about this before, but he didn't have any clues. However, he believed that no matter how the god monster planned, he only needed to do what he was supposed to do and not make any mistakes. As long as it was within the scope of a normal confrontation, they would not give the god monster a chance. As for the scheming and fighting between the mighty figures, it was not something that he could control. At the same time, The young man that was the Golden One had been waiting outside Bushutian according to the instructions of the Golden Talisman. At the moment when the people of Dao noticed the anti-heaven and earth, he knew that his chance had arrived. He snuck in silently, and in the blink of an eye, he snuck into the Kuan-Shur continent. He was originally a living being of the continent, and at this moment, he had the protection of the Golden Talisman. Coupled with the fact that the heavenly secrets were in chaos, he successfully deceived the people of Dao. At this point he stopped. According to the instructions of the Golden Talisman, the people of Dao, Yuanzun, would go to the barrier between the two realms because of a major event. At this time, the people of Kuan-Shur continent's defenses would be at their lowest. He could take this rare opportunity to go to the Bai tribe and quickly obtain the Khanate treasure of this era. If everything went smoothly, he would immediately use the power of the Golden Talisman to leave this place and escape to the Wanke star stream. If he succeeded, he would be able to become a disciple of that person. Although this was what he saw in the future, it was a pity that this did not happen. Thus, what appeared in front of him was a different future. Because of this, he had to do something else, and that was to find the abode of a mighty figure of the past. During the first and second eras, there were many mighty figures who built cave abodes on the Kuan-Shur continent. However, after the cycle of the eras, some of the true young mighty figures perished along with the tribulations, and some disappeared without a trace. The cave abodes they left behind either disappeared into thin air or were simply buried. Not long after, he came to a flat field and found a tree stump that was as big as a mountain. After confirming that it was what he was looking for, he silently chanted a spell. In a flash, he saw a sapling grow out of the tree stump, and after a few breaths, a lush canopy grew. The Golden Phoenix youth waited below for a while, and then he saw light bursting out from the canopy. His expression changed, and he got up and went inside. The light instantly engulfed his figure. He only felt a little absent-minded, and then his feet landed on the ground. He looked around and saw that he had come to a cave hall, and the surrounding scenery matched what he had seen before. He knew that he had found the right place. He walked into the depths of the cave abode, and soon came to the central hall. There was a throne in front of him, and there was a portrait hanging above it. He bowed and said, "I'm here under someone's request to wake the Exalted Lord up. If I've disturbed you, I hope the Exalted Lord won't blame me." Even if a true young mighty figure died, if there was karma involved, or if his essence chi didn't dissipate, and if someone was willing to cast a spell, it could still be reflected. His purpose of coming here was to bring the owner of the cave abode into the world. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt the Golden Talisman in his divine aperture jump and release a ray of light that shone directly on the portrait. After a while, the Taoist in the portrait slightly moved his eyes. He took a step forward and walked down from the portrait and stood on the throne. The Golden Phoenix youth hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm Zhu Anqi, greetings to Exalted Lu Hua." The Taoist looked down and said, "Since you can wake me up into the world, you must be sent by that person. I can't calculate it now, so tell me about the situation outside." Zhu Anqi hurriedly told him everything that he knew in detail. When the Taoist heard it, he sighed and said, "I didn't expect it to be like this." He looked at Zhu Anqi and said, "When I left the world, I purposely left this wisp of essence chi to repay the karma I owed. You can tell me what you want, but I'm just a wisp of essence chi now, and I don't have any talisman with me. I'm afraid that what I can do is limited. If you want me to deal with those few Taoists of the human Tao, then forgive me for not being able to do anything." Now, he was just a true young clone at most. Yuan Zun of the human Tao could easily kill him with a single thought, unless he had a Tao treasure. But regardless of whether he could use it or not, the Tao treasures that were passed down were all in the hands of the current true young cultivators of the human Tao, and there were almost none of them left. Even he couldn't think of what he could do. Just when Zhu Anqi was about to speak, the Golden Talisman hidden in his divine aperture moved, and another consciousness entered his mind. In an instant, he seemed to have changed into another person. He slowly stood up, and his gaze also became sharp. He said, "I know that Exalted Lu Hua and a few other Taoists were in the peeping upper realm, and they had tried to open up a world to connect to turbid heaven. Now, I just want to know the way to enter this world. Chapter 1874. Seeing Zhu Anqi's expression, exalted Lu Hua instantly knew that Zhu Anqi had been manipulated by the divine decree behind him. He nodded slowly and said, "So it's for this matter. But you should know that although I joined hands with a few fellow Taoists to accomplish this, we didn't succeed in the end due to our insufficient cultivation. If not, we would have gone to this place long ago and wouldn't have waited for you to come and ask about it today." Zhu Anqi didn't care about it at all and said, "It doesn't matter. Although you didn't succeed, you left behind a fragmented world in the end. You only need to tell me how to get there." Exalted Lu Hua was surprised and took a look at him. Apparently, he didn't expect Ning Fan to know about this matter. After thinking for a while, he roughly guessed Ning Fan's intention and asked, "Judging from the current situation, you seem to be in a disadvantageous position. Do you want to use this as a way out?" Zhu Anqi didn't hide it and said, "Nowadays, the people of humanity are too aggressive and don't understand my efforts. Seeing that the world I created is going to be destroyed, I can only jump out of the great thousand worlds and establish a safe place. Your fragmented world is just right for me to use." Now that he had fused with the myriad K star stream and had been targeted by Zhang Yan, he couldn't go to other places to establish a heavenly world. It could be said that he had no way to retreat. If the myriad K star stream was defeated, he would be completely defeated. Previously, he had tried to send the ancient deities to the anti-heaven and earth, but Demon Master Qi Zhou rejected him without hesitation. As a result, he could only think of another way. Exalted Lu Hua had a fragmented world here. In addition to the karma entanglement between him and the exalted Lu Hua, he could play a similar role to the ancient deities. As long as he could control it well, he could transfer the Weili that he had stolen from Bushutian over there. By then, even if Zhang Yan came here again, he would have to start from the beginning, just like how he had attacked the myriad K star stream in the beginning. Exalted Lu Hua didn't reply immediately. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Zhu Anqi didn't rush him. He just stood there and waited patiently with his hands behind his back. After a long time, Exalted Lu Hua's gaze fell on him and he said, "I can tell you about this, and I can also cooperate with you to end this karma. It's just that the path leading to the Chaos Heaven is extremely secretive, and not many people know about the broken world that was left behind. It's impossible for those who joined hands with me to leak this information. Can you tell me where did you get this information from?" Zhu Anqi said bluntly, "This has nothing to do with you." Exalted Lu Hua wasn't annoyed. He nodded and said, "Since you aren't willing to tell me, I won't force you. I only have a strand of my essence qi left. This karma has been settled, and I'll be a deity in the mortal world in the future. Just now, I have the hope of reincarnating." Zhu Anqi said meaningfully, "You underestimate yourself too much. Although you said that you are dead, who knows what the real situation is like?" "You mean?" Exalted Lu Hua stopped. After pondering for a while, he nodded seriously, "It makes sense." What Zhu Anqi meant was that his original body might have gone to that world long ago, but the strand of essence qi he left behind didn't know about it. Although this body formed by a wisp of essence qi could represent the exalted Lu Hua, it was only a part of the exalted Lu Hua and not his entire body. Therefore, the memories stopped at the moment when the exalted Lu Hua was slashed out. No one knew what had happened after that. Exalted Lu Hua understood that Zhu Anqi didn't tell him this out of kindness. He just wanted to let him know that if his original body still existed, he would be able to get rid of this karma by ending this last karma. He stood up and said, "I'll accept your invitation." He stretched out his hand and pushed open a door. Then, he said solemnly, "The broken world is right here. I'll wait for you inside. However, I'll make an agreement with you. If you don't come, this matter will end on the day when my divine qi dissipates." Zhu Anqi's expression didn't change as he said, "Of course. If I don't come, I'll be killed by the enemy. Then all the karma in the past will be cut off, and you won't be involved anymore." Exalted Lu Hua nodded. As his robe fluttered, he walked into the door. After a while, his figure flashed and disappeared. As soon as this person left, the foreign divine will on Zhu Anqi's body receded like a tide. His original consciousness came back to its senses. Just now, he didn't know what had happened. He only knew that he had achieved the purpose of this trip and could leave this place. Kunsher continent was now the territory of humanity. He might be discovered by the bigwigs of humanity at any time. Therefore, he didn't want to stay here any longer. He pointed at the space between his eyebrows, and the golden talisman flew out. He bowed and said, "Exalted, please take me away." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden talisman suddenly shone brightly and instantly enveloped him. At the same time, the big tree outside also instantly withered and turned into dust that drifted away with the wind. It could no longer be found, not even a little bit closer than before. Within the myriad K star stream, after the primordial deities and monsters retreated, everything calmed down. Everyone was at peace. Previously, in order to guard against these ferocious monsters, Wei Zihong had temporarily stopped attacking and called back all his men. However, he hadn't been idle for the past few days. He had already made all the arrangements. After dealing with the primordial deities and monsters, he would be able to attack the rest of the domains. However, the impact of this battle was not small. An indescribable turbulence had actually appeared in the void, and those who forcefully passed through it would instead be swallowed up and vanish without a trace. He guessed that the great expert on the other side had probably anticipated this and was using this to delay them. He had specially asked Dao Xiao and the others to come forward and try to calm it down. However, it wasn't very effective. After wreaking havoc for half a year, the turbulence had just now calmed down. At this time, he had received a letter from Sima Quan and Peng Xiong. They said that the myriad K sects had all joined forces and were ready to face their attack. After careful consideration, Wei Zihong had summoned all the experts to discuss this matter. After some discussion, he felt that they could rely on their current strength to suppress the other side. This was a good opportunity to exterminate the remnants of the myriad K sect in one fell swoop and truly complete their mission. Hence, 3 days after receiving the news, he mobilized all the forces he could muster under the premise that his path of retreat was secure. He drove the 9 turrets palace city and attacked the myriad K sects. Myriad K star stream, Ao Chi Tian. This Fang world was far from being comparable to the Luo Zhu Tian and Wanqing Tian. It was usually very desolate, but now, almost all the remaining sects and forces in the myriad K star stream had gathered here. Previously, the myriad K sects were unwilling to join forces. However, after suffering a few losses, they realized that if they didn't join forces, they would only be defeated one by the demon god's followers. Hence, they could only gather all their forces here and prepare for the final battle. All the bloodline descendants of the fiend gods knew that this was the final moment. If they weren't able to overcome this calamity, then the natural order that had existed since the world was created would collapse. The benefit of doing this was that even those who had disloyal thoughts were now dragged into this together, and they were staring at each other. They were unable to escape and could only stay behind and fight to the death like everyone else. During this period of time, everyone had continuously raised their strength through sacrifices. The Void Mother seemed to have received the wishes of the masses. Even if the sacrifices were insufficient, she would reward them many times more than usual. For example, the Nether Void Divine Essence had reached the point where it could be obtained as much as it wanted. Although the ancient deities and monsters weren't able to expel the cultivators, it gave the natives enough time to prepare. People like Shi Wanzong and Iwujiu were extremely rare in the past. That was because it wasn't easy to cultivate to this level. Another reason was that there had always been a mysterious force suppressing the appearance of such people. But now, as if sensing the arrival of true danger, the shackles of the world had been released. Those who were usually only a step away from the door were now entering this realm one after another. In a short period of time, the sects had gained several powerful cultivators. If it weren't for the existence of these people, the alliance of the sects would have collapsed without a fight after the news of the ancient deities and monsters' defeat. It was also for this reason that these natives were the most determined to resist the cultivators. They knew that everything they had was obtained by sacrificing the Void Mother. If this foundation collapsed, they would have nothing left. Hence, they had to fight to the death. The 9 platforms palace city advanced for a month and gradually approached Ao Chi Tian. During this time, Wei Zihong continuously received news from Sima Quan and Iwujio. This proved that the alliances hadn't moved, nor had they sent anyone to attack the realms that the cultivators had taken over. In reality, this was meaningless. With the protection of the restrictive formations, other than the ancient deities and monsters, the realms couldn't be taken over in a short period of time. Even if they took over 1 or 2, it wouldn't change anything. By then, the outcome of the battle would have been decided. However, there was one thing that was worth paying attention to. The various bloodline sects had brought out all of their guardian deities and monsters. Through sacrificing the Void Mother, they had gradually increased their strength. These deities were also a force that couldn't be ignored. He didn't relax in the slightest. He immediately found Qi Xiaolan and many bloodline descendants of the deities and monsters who had sought refuge with him. He instructed them to think of a way to stop these deities and monsters. However, he also understood that the outcome of the battle would ultimately depend on the strength of the upper echelons. From this point, it could be seen that the side of the human Dao was clearly superior to the natives of Wan Quebec. This time, as long as they could defeat and annihilate the enemies in front of them, they would be able to finish the battle in one fell swoop and completely end this 1K Star Stream campaign. Within the Qinghuan Palace, Zhang Yan also looked over. The critical moment had arrived. If there were no accidents, the outcome of this battle would be decided. In reality, up until now, there were still many uninhabited realms of 1K Star Stream that hadn't been conquered. There might still be many bloodline descendants of the deities and monsters hiding there. Within the chaotic realm, there were even more ancient deities and monsters that hadn't entered the real world. However, these were no longer important. Once the overall situation was established, these people would no longer be able to make a comeback. At this moment, he suddenly felt something and looked into the river of heavenly secrets. He saw an inconspicuous dark line suddenly fluctuate. According to this, there seemed to be a sliver of a possibility of jumping out of the chess game. He only looked for a moment, and then it disappeared. It should be that person intentionally disturbing him so that he couldn't tell where exactly it would land. He sneered. In his opinion, the more these hidden lines were exposed, the better it was. This way, they wouldn't be used by people with ulterior motives in the future. Moreover, it wasn't that he didn't have any precautions. When the time came, the true development of the situation might not go as the other party wanted. Chapter 1875. Above Ao Chi Tian's Vitality Gold Peak were numerous pavilions that floated in midair like the stars in the sky, and all of them were connected by blood-red chains. Due to the various pavilions swaying slightly from time to time, it caused the blood-red chains to tighten and loosen at times. This place was built by the 1K sects based on the 9 platforms palace city. The original intention was not to concentrate their strength, but to tie all the sects together as much as possible. This was because everyone was in a state of panic, so they had no choice but to do so. Even if it was the descendants of the gods and monsters, most people had to rely on the flying palace platform when they traveled through the void. Otherwise, they would only be able to guarantee that they would not be attacked by the gods and monsters everywhere. Therefore, the flying palace platform was a must, and it was usually something that many blood descendant sects could only build with all their strength. Now that they were all locked here, no one could escape. They could only stay and die with the sections. At the center stood the grandest palace platform, and all the blood-red chains were directly tied to it. At this moment, there were 4 people sitting in a narrow flying building at the highest point. They were the 4 blood sect masters with the highest positions in all the alliances. Because most of the sects in the 1K alliance had similar strength, and there were no famous people like Yi Wujio or Shi Wanzong, there was no alliance leader. But for the sake of coordination, these 4 people were elected to be in charge of everything before the arrival of the Fiend's celestial believers. However, the atmosphere in the room was abnormally gloomy, and everyone's expression was solemn. Normally, if they could sit in such a position and rule over all the sects, they would definitely be wild with joy. However, it was different now. Everyone knew that if they couldn't handle this, it would result in the collapse of all the worlds. It was just that the people below could still surrender when they saw that the situation was bad, but people like them who were pushed out would definitely be killed. Now that the sects had more or less finished defending, the four people were discussing if there were any details that needed to be fixed. At this moment, they suddenly heard a commotion outside. One of them couldn't help but stand up and ask, "What's the matter?" After a while, an elder pushed the door open and entered. He looked at the four of them before bowing and saying in a deep voice, "Sect masters, the fiends celestial believers have arrived. They are now fighting with the god fiends that we have placed in the periphery." Everyone's breathing tightened as they looked at each other. Finally, their gazes landed on a middle-aged man with a long beard who was dressed in a blood-patterned robe. Someone said to him, "Sect Master Ban, the suggestions you've made these few days are all feasible, and the prediction of the arrival of the fiend celestial believers is also accurate. Now, it's up to you to make the decision. We're all willing to follow your orders." Sect leader Ban didn't shirk either. At this point, he couldn't back down even if he wanted to. He said in a deep voice, "Sect leaders, we can offer the last batch of sacrificial offerings." This batch of offerings included all the treasuries of the various sections. They were prepared to exchange for a gift from the Void Mother before the battle to further increase their strength. They had already guessed earlier that there must be spies from the fiend celestial believers around them. Now that the fiend celestial believers had led their people to the front, even if they knew their movements, there was no time to add more manpower. One of the sect masters hesitated for a moment before asking, "Should we leave some behind?" Sect leader Ban said with a firm expression, "No need." He looked at this person and said, "Sect leader Pai, I know you can't bear to part with these treasures, but if I can survive this, then these things can be obtained again. If we can't, then what's the use of leaving them behind?" Sect leader Pai sighed and said with a bitter smile, "Then let's offer them all. Of course I know this logic. It's just that some of the god fiends have yet to mature. If we keep them for a period of time and sacrifice them, the returns will be 100 or even 1,000 times greater than now." Just as they were speaking, noises came from outside again. The elder who reported the news came out and asked around before turning back to say, "Sect masters, the outermost god fiends have collapsed." Everyone's expression changed, and one of the sect masters said solemnly, "The fiend celestial believers are coming in aggressively." In the time it took to say a few words, they had actually broken through the first layer of the setup. It wouldn't take long for them to reach them. Sect leader Ban said, "Although we have painstakingly set up the outer layer, it can only delay the enemy's momentum. It won't last for long. We'd better seize the opportunity and quickly offer the offerings." The other three also knew that there was no time to waste, so they all stood up and bowed to Sect Master Ban, saying yes. Although their positions were equal, Sect leader Ban dared to stand up and preside over the overall situation at this critical moment. The three of them were rather impressed by his responsibility. After the three of them left, the various sects also began to move. Because they knew that the fiend celestial believers were about to launch a large-scale attack, no one dared to delay at this time. This sacrifice almost involved all the sects and could not be concealed. Sima Quan and Peng Xiang's doppelgangers sensed it and immediately sent the news through talisman messages. Wei Zihong quickly received the report. He sneered. This should be the enemy's last struggle before they were annihilated. Before coming here, he had repeatedly discussed with everyone and made all kinds of predictions. It seemed that the sacrifice before the battle was also within his expectations. However, he didn't think that it would be much of a threat to them, because whether it was the descendants of the god fiends or cultivators, it still depended on the competition between the mortal transformation and enlightenment levels. Moreover, the advancement of realms couldn't be achieved by simply instilling power out of thin air. If that was the case, all the descendants of the god fiends would be able to reach the limitless netherworld realm. There would be no need for them to cultivate themselves. Only by refining their own bloodline to a certain level would they have a chance of walking this path. If an ordinary sect elder suddenly obtained power, he might not even be able to withstand it, let alone fight the enemy. Perhaps some people who were lacking a bit of stamina would be able to break through the barrier, but the number would definitely not be many. Therefore, he wasn't worried at all. However, since he knew that they were busy with the sacrifice, he had to find a way to disturb them. After thinking for a while, he instructed, "Find the bird-he deities that sought refuge with us a few days ago and order them to sneak into this world. Regardless of the cost, try your best to charge through the gaps to the rear of these natives." The disciple standing at the side immediately agreed and went to pass on the order. Not long after, densely packed deities that looked like insects spread out from Jyotai Palace. After going out for a short distance, they disappeared one by one. The 1K natives that wanted to stop them suddenly lost their target. These bird-he deities were the rare deities with intelligence in the 1K star stream. They didn't have much power, but they could rely on some kind of magical power to tame some ferocious deities and make them their slaves. This person judged that the cultivators would obtain the final victory, so he took the initiative to seek refuge with them not long ago. After seeing this ability, Wei Zihong also ordered people to cooperate with this person to capture many deities and deities for him to enslave. Most of them were good at hiding and even hiding. Although they weren't of much help to the overall situation, this was the time for them to display their abilities. At this moment, on the other side, most of the deities and deities' blood descendants surrounded the altars on Aochi land and even on the tower. At this moment, countless sacrifices were being offered. Every time a spiritual light flashed and the sacrifice was taken away, a blood-colored light would descend from the void and scatter on the heads of the people standing below the platform. This person's aura would also faintly increase. Sect leader Ban and the other three were also standing below an altar. However, they had already reached the boundless underworld realm a few days ago. Even if they offered more sacrifices, they wouldn't be able to raise their power to a higher level. Therefore, they could only use the underworld divine essence to pour into their own blood tools. Previously, with the help of the few cultivators that they had captured, they had refined many more powerful blood tools. Although these were not as mystical, they were still suitable for themselves. They could even slightly resist the magical treasures, which was better than before when they were completely defenseless. At this moment, the four of them suddenly sensed a strange movement in the sky. One of the clan leaders with the surname Gu turned around and stared. With a loud boom, the void exploded into balls of fire, and the sky was torn apart like a piece of cloth. Then, the silhouettes of the flying insects were revealed. He said angrily, "What's going on? How did the outside defense work? How could these demon god pawns invade this place?" Sect leader Ban took a look and judged that these were just small problems. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, only a few of them should have slipped through. They're just disturbing our ritual. The people below will be enough to deal with them." Just as he said, the blood descendants around the platform didn't notice these insects before. Now that they saw them, they all leaped forward to stop them. In a short while, not a single one of them was left out. This little setback was not taken seriously by the four of them. They quietly waited for the results of the sacrifice. However, when they heard that the layers of obstacles that they had painstakingly set up outside were continuously broken in a short period of time, their hearts became more and more apprehensive. After an unknown period of time, the old man from before came to their side and bowed to them. He said, "Four sect leaders, the sect's sacrifice has been completed." Sect leader Ban asked in a deep voice, "Did anyone break through the barrier?" The old man shook his head. Sect leader Ban shook his head and said, "Looks like we've thought too much. This method is ultimately difficult to succeed." The old man said, "However, many of them have obtained the divine essence of underworld. When necessary, as long as they refine it, they can advance a level. It can be considered a small gain." Sect leader Ban nodded. Once these people used the divine essence, they wouldn't be far from the gods that only knew how to kill. However, perhaps this was more useful in the current situation. He waved his hand and the old man bowed again before retreating. He then looked at the three sect leaders in front of him and said solemnly, "Everyone here has obtained the art of underworld." However, people like Yi Wujiao and Shi Wanzong were still defeated by the demon gods' believers. Therefore, we must not be careless. As far as I know, these two were defeated by a group attack. Therefore, if there's any movement later, try to work together with the two of you and not act alone. Sect Leader Pai said. Sect Leader Ban is right. Now is not the time to flaunt our strength. The demon gods believers have countless tricks up their sleeves. We must protect each other and do our best to protect ourselves. Only then will we have a chance to win this battle. At this moment, a series of dull rumbles came from beyond the sky, as if thunder was rolling in from the distant sky. Then, the gods and monsters in charge of guarding the sky dispersed, and a grand palace that blotted out the sun and sky suddenly broke through heaven and earth, forcing its way into their field of vision. Chapter 1876. The colossal figure of the 9 platforms palace appeared in the sky in a tyrannical manner, causing those who saw this scene to be deeply shocked. It seemed to be close, but in reality, it was still a distance away from the land. However, because it was so huge, it could be seen from afar, but even before it came close, it caused the disciples of the 1K Alliance to panic. Because of this, the various towers shook, causing the blood rainbow chains to also shake. When Sect Leader Ban saw this scene, he could not help but sigh. He knew that the successive defeats against the followers of the demon god had caused many people to lose confidence in this battle, and there were even many people who had lost the will to fight. However, whether this generation was willing or not, as long as the descendants of the demon gods stood here today, if they wanted to continue living, then they must fight hard to carve out a future. Sect Master Pai looked behind him and frowned. He didn't expect these disciples to be so panicked. He said, Sect Master Ban, now is not the time to attack. Should we release the guardian deity and use it to block them? Sect Master Ban waved his hand, rejecting the suggestion. These guardian deities and monsters should be used together. If they were released now, they would only be defeated one by one, so there was no need to do so. Moreover, these blood descendants were not the main deciding force of this battle. They were only placed here so that no one had a path of retreat, so that they would fight without a care for the consequences. He said, tell the person in charge of the deities and monsters to delay the arrival of the demon god believers as much as possible. I don't care what method they use, or what price they have to pay. In short, delay as long as they can. The old man nodded and went to pass on the order. Sect Master Pai said, Sect Master Ban, are you preparing to attract the fierce monster? Sect Master Ban nodded. Earlier, they had asked the Void Mother for advice on how to fight against the demon god believers, and at that time, they had also received a response, so now they were prepared to act according to the plan. He turned around and said to a man in his 30s, dressed in luxurious clothes and a jade belt beside him, Sect Master Liao, even that fierce monster may not be able to stop the demon god believers. We still need to observe their methods from a closer distance, so we will be relying on you. Sect Master Liao said, leave it to me. A blood cloud rose above his head, and then it shrouded everyone, including himself, and spun around them a few times. After a few breaths, the blood cloud struggled to come out again, and then it transformed into a few figures that looked exactly the same as everyone else about 10 feet away. This was actually a bloodline clone that had been separated from them, and this clone possessed all of their divine abilities and magic power. However, the prerequisite was that the original body had to continuously provide divine underworld essence to maintain it. Even the slightest interruption would cause it to dissipate, so when these bloodline clones moved, they themselves could not do anything else. This kind of doppelganger had a flaw. Once it fought with an enemy, it would consume a lot of energy. This was especially so when it encountered a powerful being. It would probably only take a few rounds before it would collapse. Thus, it wouldn't be very useful in an official battle. However, it was undoubtedly the best choice for probing the enemy. When Sect Master Ban and the others saw that the bloodline clone had been formed, they all sat down cross-legged and continuously poured divine underworld essence into the bloodline clone. They even shifted their consciousness over, and in an instant, everything was in that bloodline clone's body. To them, at this moment, it was like they had changed into another body. Sect Master Ban examined this body. because this method required a long time to prepare, so he had not tried it before. Fortunately, there were no obstructions, and when he operated the bloodline's strange power, there was no difference from his original body. He said, "Everyone, follow me to watch the battle. Remember, try not to face the demon god's believers head-on." Although the cultivators before them had destroyed the two sects, Changtian sect and Rong sect, and destroyed most of their forces, there were still a few who escaped. These people had also seen the scene of the battle between the demon god's believers and their sect masters, and then some of them had escaped to Ao Kongtian's place. In order to prepare for today's battle, Sect Master Ban and the others had also found these people and tried to understand some things. But what they had heard from others was far inferior to what they had seen with their own eyes. Therefore, this time, they planned to observe more closely, thinking that they could prepare for the real battle. When the four of them arrived in the sky, they saw densely packed black spots suddenly flying out from outside the Jotai Palace. Looking closely, they saw that there were countless insect-like things rushing out together with the dragon demon, and they collided with the gods and monsters that had come to intercept them. In an instant, the entire sky seemed to be boiling. From the void to the stars, there were billions of gods and dragon demon, and between heaven and earth, there were countless bloodlights and spiritual rainbows colliding. The battle between the two sides had entered into an unusually fierce and brutal fight. As the void of the Wanke star stream and the boundaries were not clearly separated, there were countless cracks that connected them, and it could be said that there were holes everywhere like a bug's nest. Therefore, the scope of this battle had actually affected the void, and in places that could not be seen, the battle was actually even more intense. Inside the Jotai Palace, Wei Zihong was standing in the hall, and behind him were Sima Quan and Peng Xiang, and further below were many disciples and elders. He could feel that there were gods and monsters colliding with the palace's restrictions at every moment. Even though they could not break this place with their strength, but the consumption of the spiritual pool was also considerable, and this was not conducive to the battle in the future. He ordered, "Invite the demon god's believers to go out and try to clean up as many of these gods and monsters as possible." Just now, he had just given the order when a disciple came up to the hall to report, and his tone was slightly nervous. "Sect Master, there are countless gods and monsters coming from behind us, and they seem to want to cut off our escape route." Wei Zihong's expression did not change. He pointed a finger, and a screen of light climbed up from the altar in the hall. With just a ripple, the scene in the void was displayed. The description reported by this disciple was not the least bit exaggerated. Now, everywhere he looked, there were all kinds of strange figures of gods and monsters, and they almost covered the entire void. There were so many that even his eyes could not take in all of them. And seeing this scene, the cultivators all sucked in a breath of cold air. These gods and monsters seemed to be able to drown them if they rushed up. Wei Zihong's expression did not change at all. This battle was to determine the future of the Wanke star stream, and he was sure that the people behind him would not be able to hold back, which could be seen from the actions of these gods and monsters. However, battles that involved the upper levels of the Weili had never been decided by numbers. Although there were many gods and monsters, they only needed to send a metamorphosis mortal cultivator to settle this matter. But when he thought of this, he felt that something was not right. The other party should also know that this would be useless, but they still did it. Could it be that it was just to harass him? His thoughts spun, and suddenly he remembered something. In the 1K void, there was a kind of god and monster that looked like a heavenly dragon, called the strange serpent. It was said that it would only appear during natural disasters and earthly calamities, when countless living beings were killed. When he first learned of this kind of monster, he thought that this should also be a kind of sacrifice, just in a different form. And the scene in front of him just happened to meet all the conditions to attract this monster. This should not be a mere coincidence. Perhaps this was the real reason why the other party called these gods and monsters over to die. After realizing this, he immediately said, "Tell the elders and the heavenly lord to be careful. There might be ferocious monsters appearing in a moment." After he passed down the order, everyone was on high alert. After a few hours, as the number of dead and injured dragon demons and monsters increased, A strange movement began to come from the void. With Wei Zihong's reminder, everyone was on high alert. Another long time passed. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed in the sky. In that instant, the silhouette of a W-arm appeared out of thin air. The head and tail of the W-arm couldn't be seen, and its body seemed to be boundless. Furthermore, everyone could sense that as more and more fiend gods died, the aura of the W-arm was also increasing. It really is the strange serpent. The divine eye on Wei Zihong's forehead opened wide, and he was looking at this god and monster. Rumor had it that this monster relied on dead living beings to replenish itself, so the dead gods and dragon demons in this battle would all become nourishment for its strength. Although this god and monster that suddenly appeared was unexpected, he could see that it might not be comparable to the ancient gods and monsters that appeared before. Because no matter how much its strength increased, there was a certain limit. But from the looks of it, a few Duju cultivators were enough to deal with it, but the longer it dragged on, the more difficult it would be, so they had to act as soon as possible. Just as he was about to arrange for people to go out and kill this god and monster, Sima Quan suddenly stared into the depths of the void and said, "Sect leader Wei, perhaps we have to deal with more than one god and monster." He can feel that there is an extremely unfamiliar yet familiar aura that is appearing, but if it has seen something before, it will not forget it. This is extremely contradictory. Wei Zihong asked very cautiously, "Sect leader Sima, have you sensed something?" Sima Quan knew that since he felt a sense of familiarity, he must have seen it before. He immediately used his transcendence energy to search for the past, and the scene in front of him instantly retreated one by one. Very quickly, he returned to the Xiong Lu, and it was at this time that he came into contact with this god and monster. At that time, in order to build the guidance altar, Zhang Chan and the others used the name of a god and monster to establish their sect, and they chose an extremely rare god and monster. And not long after that, Gong Qi personally said the name of this god and monster. Songshou. From the looks of it now, its origin was not simple. It was definitely not what the natives usually thought, but should be an ancient god and monster. He said in a low voice, "Sect leader, do you remember that in the illustrated handbook that sect leader Qi presented, some ancient gods and monsters that are sleeping in the chaos realm will awaken as long as their names are called, and they will then charge into the present world? Previously, when we were in the Xiong Lu, the fellow Taoists used the name of this god and established their sect, but unexpectedly, they formed karma with this god and thought that it was just an ordinary god and monster, but now it seems that our judgment was wrong." After hearing this, Wei Zihong nodded and said, "I see." He pondered in his heart, according to sect leader Sima, this god could have entered the present world a few years ago, but it delayed until now. Just now is the time for it to appear. He immediately thought that this was probably a spy that the almighty expert behind them had only revealed itself at this moment. When he thought of this, his spirit was lifted. Previously, he had guessed that the other party might have some hidden killer move, and such a move was usually the most frightening when it was not used. Now that it had appeared in front of him, perhaps it meant that the other party had already taken out all their chips, and probably had no more tricks to use. Chapter 1877. Although Wei Zihong had made a judgment in his heart, he ignored the enemy in front of him and decisively said, "Before Tsongshou arrives, pass down my order and ask the heavenly lords to get rid of this strange serpent as soon as possible." The most ideal thing now was to get rid of this monster before Tsongshou arrived. Because once such an ancient monster appeared, other than the almighties of the same level as it, no one else could intervene, and those who were killed would instead further fuel the serpent's arrogance. If the two were together, it would actually become even more difficult to deal with. After he passed down the order, the heavenly lord of Xianhong heaven He Xianin, the heavenly lord of star-setting heaven Mei Ruoqing, the heavenly lord of Long He heaven Fan Shu and the others immediately flew out from Jiutai Palace and went in the direction of the monster. The moment the three of them appeared, the mythical serpent immediately sensed danger. It also knew that they were coming for it. A cunning glint flashed in its eyes, but it did not fight with the three of them. Instead, it retreated. It was not retreating in the true sense of the word, It was retreating endlessly. If the three of them were to blindly charge at it, it would be impossible for them to reach it. Mei Ruoqing said, "This monster seems to have some intelligence." This was because the more living beings that were sacrificed, the stronger they would become. This strange flood dragon was clearly unwilling to fight them and wanted to continue accumulating power. This was different from the gods and monsters that they had seen before that only knew how to kill. He Xianyin said indifferently, "It can't escape." To put it bluntly, this was just the use of some kind of supernatural power. As the heavenly lord of a realm, as long as they felt the location of the qi movement, they only needed to shift and they could appear in front of it. It would just consume some more mana and vitality. What they needed now was to end the battle quickly, so they naturally did not care about these. After a brief discussion, the three of them determined the qi movement and circulated their mana. In the next moment, they had already arrived in front of the strange serpent. As the main attacker, He Xianyin's figure appeared and immediately made a hand sign. Boundless water light appeared out of thin air and swept towards the monster. The strange flood dragon did not expect that everyone could suddenly kill in front of it and was caught off guard for a moment. In a hurry, it instinctively twisted its body, and a wave of profound patterns appeared in the void. The water light was like hitting a rock, and was immediately shattered into pieces, like broken jade splashing, but the remaining qi water did not dissipate, but turned into countless crystal-clear dewdrops, like a line of rain, sprinkled, and stuck to the long body of the flood dragon. Xiao Jiao felt his body sink. His body was not made of flesh and blood, but a combination of the four energies of ruthlessness, ferocity, calamity, and blood. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the water to stick to him, and he should not have such a feeling. Knowing that he had fallen into a trap, he did not know what the result would be. He hurriedly shook his body, wanting to shake off the water droplets. But as soon as it moved, its body was too sluggish, causing it to slow down by a beat. It immediately revealed a huge flaw. Before it could struggle again, Mei Ruoqing immediately seized this opportunity to attack. She raised her wrist, and 3 rings flew out, turning into 3 brilliant wheels of light that covered 3 different positions of the monster. It looked like it was divided into 3 parts: front, middle, and back. Not only that, the strange flood dragon originally had no head and no tail, and its body was in the void. There was no flaw to be found, and even if it was cut in half, it would be useless. But after being hit by this treasure, scales instantly appeared, and the head, tail, and torso were cut into 3 parts. This knocked the flood dragon down from an infinite height, and at this moment, it was reduced to a mortal body. He Xianyin immediately grasped this opportunity. He formed a sword with his finger, and with a slash, a ray of light flashed from his ring and cut off his head. The strange flood dragon's body was made of flesh and blood, and when its head was cut off, blood gushed out like a flood. Its source of qi was lost, and it immediately died. Its entire body also began to collapse, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge corpse without any signs of life. The 4 sect masters of the 1K Alliance were watching the battle, and seeing such a powerful monster killed in a few rounds, they also felt a chill. Sect Master Pai pointed at it in disbelief, and turned to the others as if seeking confirmation. It was killed just like that? Sect Master Ban pondered for a moment. He clearly knew a bit more and sighed. This strange flood dragon was indeed killed, but this kind of monster is not a true living being. As long as the 4 energies of ruthlessness, ferocity, calamity, and blood accumulate to a certain degree, the incarnation can form another one, but he looked at He Xianyin and the others. If they could deal with it once, they could deal with it a second time. Even if this strange flood dragon came out again, it probably wouldn't be able to block these demon gods for long. But fortunately, they also gained something and saw many methods. If they were to encounter it, they wouldn't have fallen for that trick so easily. Sect Master Liao said, "Everyone, just now, the few demon gods are using it as their talismans. If we fight against them later, we must be careful." The few people present nodded solemnly. According to their understanding, talismans could be seen as the blood tools they controlled, but they were more powerful and every type was different. Before they understood the specific effects, they couldn't let it fall. Just now, they had seen the strange flood dragon's fate. The demon god's believers could actually turn their illusory bodies into real flesh and blood. This method was really unimaginable. Sect Master Gua said, "These three people's abilities are not as good as mine, and I know a little about their abilities. If we go down now, do you think we have a chance to kill them?" Once this suggestion was made, it instantly made the few people restless. If they could kill 3 opponents, it would reduce a lot of pressure later. Moreover, this body was just a clone. Even if they lost it, it wouldn't be a big deal. Seeing this, Sect Master Ban immediately said, "The gains do not make up for the losses." Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he said in a serious tone, "According to the reports from those who escaped from Harmony Sect and Constant Heaven Sect, these 3 people shouldn't be the strongest. Although they are a threat to me, they aren't opponents that are worth paying attention to. Even if we can kill them, we will expose our own methods, which is not in line with my original intention, so please bear with it." Sect Master Pai immediately agreed. "What you said makes sense. Everyone, please don't be impatient. These people aren't worth our time." After a pause, he said, "But if there is a real opportunity, there is no need to hold back." At this moment in the battlefield, Xianyin waved her sleeve, and a wave of water surged over, sweeping the strange flood dragon's flesh and blood into it, ensuring that it wouldn't be used by the natives. Fan Shu didn't make a move just now. He had been standing guard at the side, just in case an enemy suddenly intervened. At this moment, he transmitted a message using his divine will. "Heaven Lord He, Heaven Lord Mei, there seems to be someone spying on us outside." Xianyin glanced at a certain place in the void and said, "It should be those natives. Since they are hiding, there is no need for us to care about them. Let's go back and report first. I'm afraid we will have to deal with a fierce battle later." The 3 of them returned to the palace in an instant. Sect Master Ban watched as the 3 of them left. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with them the next time he bumped into them, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. Turning his head to look up, the other sect masters also looked up. At this moment, all of them could feel a powerful force approaching. Sect Master Pai had a trace of excitement, and his voice trembled as he said, "Is this an ancient monster?" Sect Master Liao said joyfully, "This must be the Void Mother sensing our danger, so it attracted this monster to help us." Sect Master Ban also thought so. Otherwise, there was no other way to explain the monster's arrival at this time. He took a deep breath and said with a slightly excited expression, "If that's the case, we still have a chance of winning this battle." Previously, he didn't think they could win this battle, but he had to do his best because he had to fulfill his duty. Now, he saw a glimmer of hope. What they lacked right now was a high-level battle force, and an ancient monster was equivalent to 4 of them. This was equivalent to doubling their manpower, and the effect it could bring was immeasurable. Within the 9-city palace platform, Wei Zihong had also noticed the anomaly in the void at the first instant. Fortunately, he had eliminated the mystical serpent in time. If he had been slightly slower, it would have been even more troublesome. He invited Ao Xiao and the others over and said, "Song Shou is an ancient mythical creature. I'll have to trouble all of you to deal with this. Even though the mystical serpent has been killed once, it will appear again when the number of living beings on the battlefield increases. I wonder if any of you have a way to deal with it?" Chiu Chong cupped his hands and said, "Sect Master Wei, just now, I've already seen the remains of the serpent. It's caused by the vicious blood energy in the battlefield. If we can cut off the source, it will not appear again. Even if we can't, we can delay its appearance." As he spoke, he took out a jade plate and said, "Sect Master Wei, I only need a few people to take this plate to the void and stabilize the aura." Wei Zihong looked at Xianyin and the others and said, "I'll have to trouble the 3 of you with this." Xianyin and the others bowed and agreed. Not long after he arranged the matters, the huge aura that lingered in the void became even more gloomy. Every once in a while, the stars on the continent would tremble, as if a giant monster from outer space was crashing into the sky. After a long time, there was another tremor. Amidst the rumbling sound, The aura finally broke through the barrier and entered the real world. While everyone was in a daze, they saw a monster that looked like a strange bird appear in their minds. But in reality, everyone only saw a fierce eye that occupied a large part of the void, and it was surrounded by blazing, mysterious flames. The bodies of some of the weaker cultivators tightened, because they all felt that this eye was looking at them alone, and they immediately felt their minds tremble. But in the blink of an eye, the eye turned into a bottomless mouth, as if they would be swallowed in the next moment. But for some reason, their bodies were unable to move at this moment, and they could only watch helplessly as they fell into the mouth. Right at this moment, the chimes hanging above the 9 palaces rang, and a clear sound resounded down. It was like a clear spring that was washing away the turbid water, and the bodies of these people trembled as they broke free from the illusion. But everyone who had experienced this scene felt a lingering fear in their hearts. Clearly, they understood that if they were swallowed by the giant mouth, they would most likely not be able to return. Ao Xiao's expression was solemn as he said, "This monster is probably even more powerful than the one we fought last time." Qiu Chong said, "The monster we faced last time was awakened by the powerful beings behind it, and then it hurriedly entered the world. It wasn't at its peak, but this one is different. It moved because of karma. Just now, it has entered the world, and its strength might have already recovered. If nothing unexpected happens, it will be our biggest obstacle in this battle." Ao Xiao said coldly, "We already killed the 2 primordial monsters from before, let alone this one. It's just a slightly bigger obstacle, so there's no need to say anything. Let's join forces and kill it." Chapter 1878. When Wei Zihong saw that Ao Xiao, Qiu Chong, Cheng Li, and He Xianin had all exited the palace, he immediately ordered, "Tell all disciples to guard their minds within the palace. No one is allowed to spectate this battle." Even he could only avoid a battle of this level, let alone the junior disciples. However, he didn't summon the Black Tortoise Divine Beast this time because he hadn't encountered the natives of the Wan Ke Alliance yet. There was no need for him to reveal all of his strength at once. Besides, if he revealed too much of his strength before the actual battle, the Wan Ke Alliance would lose confidence and retreat. If that happened, it would take a lot more effort to kill them. This time, he wanted to eliminate all the natives at once. Defeating them alone was clearly not what he wanted. Sect leader Ban and the others were still standing in the sky. After cultivating the limitless nether space, they were already on the same level as this demonic beast. Naturally, they could watch the battle calmly from the sidelines. Moreover, they would definitely be able to observe the most powerful techniques of the demonic beast's believers. They couldn't miss this opportunity. Moreover, if there was a chance later, they would not hesitate to attack and eliminate 1 or 2 of their enemies. Ao Xiao and the others arrived in the sky and looked at the demonic beast with solemn expressions. Just now, the junior disciples could only see one eye. However, what they could see was also limited. This was because the size of the demonic beast was no longer as vast as it could be. It was so huge that it spanned across both the real and the illusory. Without entering those realms, it was impossible for them to see the demonic beast's entire body. Not only that, due to the differences in their cultivation, what they could see was also different. As such, it wasn't easy to find the demonic beast's weakness. Ao Xiao asked in a deep voice, "Elder Qiu, do you know the demonic beast's weakness?" Qiu Chong replied, "I'll give it a try later." He took out the single-horned golden bull seal and tossed it down with a flick of his sleeve. Normally, as long as this item landed, it would be able to find the opponent's weak point. This way, he would have a target to attack from. As the golden bull landed, it instantly sank into the fiery light of the demonic beast's eyes. However, after a moment of calculation, he suddenly furrowed his brows. Ao Xiao asked, "How is it?" Qiu Chong shook his head and said, "Although there are no obstructions when I use this seal to probe, this monster's foundation is very deep. If I want to know the result, I will have to wait at least 2 to 3 years." Ao Xiao furrowed his brows as well. The ancient deity Dozhan was not a cultivator. Based on their previous experience, the ancient deity Dojang would probably be finished within a few months. At most, it would take a year and a half. It was not that they could not delay the battle any longer. However, such a long period of time would be enough for another deity Dojang to enter the world. They could not afford to wait that long. This was absolutely not allowed. No matter what, they had to find a way to kill him before that happened. Cheng Li said, "Just now, Heavenly Lord Mei should be wielding that 3-1 golden rings. It's the one that reduced that wondrous serpent from its upper realm into a body of flesh and blood. Can I borrow that treasure?" Ao Shao said, "I know about this treasure as well. However, the power of this treasure depends on the master's cultivation. Heavenly Lord Mei is far from this monster's level, so I'm afraid she won't be able to handle it." Cheng Li waved his sleeve and said, "Since I can't divine it, I'll search for it myself." Ao Shao and Chiu Chong nodded in agreement. After the three of them reached an agreement, they didn't care about any flaws or loopholes. They immediately activated their magic power and attacked the vicious eye. The Tsang Shou monster's eye shifted and a fierce flame suddenly burst out from its side. Sparks flew out from time to time. Some of the living beings who couldn't dodge in time were immediately vaporized into nothingness. However, this did not pose much of a threat to Ao Shao and the others. After exchanging blows with it for a while, the three of them gradually discovered its weakness. Although the monster hadn't completely revealed its body, which made it impossible for them to find a suitable place to attack it, the strange power and divine abilities that the monster could use could only come from its eye. This was because the rest of its body wasn't in the real world. Naturally, it couldn't use other methods to deal with them. After discovering this, the three of them let loose. From the looks of it, the eye was just a slightly larger target, and the threat it posed to them was limited. However, there was still a string in their hearts that was stretched taut. This god monster should have more than this ability. However, the strange thing was that even as they gradually suppressed the black flames, the monster still didn't use any powerful techniques. This gave them a very strange feeling. However, the three of them didn't stop because of this. After the black flames were extinguished, the entire eye no longer had any defensive power. Magic power and divine abilities could land on it. After being bombarded, the eye started to peel off piece by piece. It was like a piece of jade that originally filled the void, but now it was badly damaged. There were cracks and crevices everywhere. However, the ferocious light in it didn't diminish in the slightest. Instead, it became even more ferocious. About 2 to 4 hours later, the eye finally couldn't hold on any longer. With a deep roar, it suddenly caved in and formed a vortex that looked like a mysterious hole. It swallowed all the living beings and their remains that couldn't escape in time. Only those who had reached a certain level of cultivation just now stood still. Then, with a loud rumble, everything was annihilated without a trace. However, this wasn't the end. After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, the true eye appeared before them again. It looked completely undamaged. Even the living beings that had been sucked into it were still floating in the air. It was as if nothing had happened just now. Ao Shao and the others immediately realized that they had returned to the time when they were fighting the monster. Not only were their positions exactly the same, but even the magic power they had used was returned to them. In other words, it was as if they hadn't used any magic power at all. Since even they were in such a state, it was obvious that the monster wouldn't have suffered any damage either. The three of them frowned. If they continued to fight like this, both sides would return to the starting point every time. In that case, there would probably never be a conclusion to this battle. Chiu Chong made another attempt and said in a deep voice, returning to the past, "This should be the ability of the eye. As long as we're still under its gaze, I'm afraid that no matter how many times we kill it, we'll return to the beginning." Cheng Li said, "Lord Ao Shao, your dragon palace has many treasures. I remember that you have a treasured mirror. Can you conceal it?" Ao Shao pondered for a moment and said, "That won't work. This eye is capable of overlooking the universe. Unless we seal ourselves, we definitely won't be able to avoid its gaze. That way, we won't be able to fight this monster." Cheng Li said, It looks like the only way is to bypass its eye and find the rest of the monster's body. We'll find the blind spots of the eye and launch an attack from there. Only then will we be able to kill it. The three of them discussed for a while with their divine wills and decided that Ao Xiao and Cheng Li would put pressure on the monster head-on. Qiu Cheng would enter the chaotic realm and the illusory realm. He would observe the monster's body and combine his divine wills with his divine wills. When the time came, he would be able to see the monster's entire appearance. Based on this, it wouldn't be difficult to find the true method to defeat the monster. Qiu Cheng circulated his magic power and created a clone. His clone slowly disappeared and entered the chaotic realm by following a wave of energy. However, he could no longer sense anything after an instant. This was because once he entered this realm, he would be forced into a long slumber, just like the ancient monster. Fortunately, he managed to get a glimpse of the monster's body during this short period of time. Soon after, he created many clones that continuously passed through the illusory realm. Ao Xiao and Cheng Li were currently engaged in a head-on battle with Zhang Shou. However, it didn't take long for the two of them to realize that even though Zhang Shou hadn't changed much compared to the last time, they were able to easily suppress the black flames. Just now, they were having a hard time doing so. Cheng Li's expression became slightly grave as he said, "It looks like every time this monster is killed, its resistance against us increases. If this continues, it won't take long for us to reach a point where we won't be able to do anything to it." Ao Xiao glanced at Qiu Cheng, who was performing a hand seal to the side. He said, "There's no need to worry about this. We just need to restrain this monster. There's no need to hurry and disperse it. We just need to do our best to stall for time until Elder Qiu returns." Qiu Cheng finally emerged from his meditative state after the two of them battled for more than 10 days. He transmitted a message using his divine wills. "My friends, I didn't disappoint you. I've already found a place where it can't see. Please follow me." Once he finished speaking, his avatar swayed and transformed into a streak of light. Ao Xiao and Cheng Li's spirits were lifted. They followed him. At the same time, Zhang Yan was also watching the battle in the Pure Huan Palace of the Dark Abyss Heaven. The moment he found a loophole in Zhang Shou's plan, he also noticed that the power of the world in the Heavenly Secrets River was approaching him with an unstoppable force. His eyes flashed. If the mastermind didn't have any special tricks up his sleeves, then it would only be a matter of time before these natives were destroyed. However, there were very few chess pieces that could be used within the Wanke Palace. Unless that person brought out all of the primordial gods and monsters that existed within the chaotic realm, then they might be able to stop the attacks of the cultivators. In reality, this was very difficult to accomplish. This was because the entire world of the myriad K star stream was created by the mastermind. Therefore, he could be called the Lord of Creation. The Void Mother was the embodiment of the order of the world after the creation of this realm. It existed between existence and non-existence. In a sense, it represented part of the mastermind's will, but it also had its own rules and laws that it had to abide by. As a result, the mastermind could easily destroy the myriad K star stream. However, if he wanted to intervene in this world, he had to go through the Void Mother. This was also why he only used omens and warnings to warn the natives. Moreover, if he wanted to exert more will during this process, he would have to expend a portion of his strength to slightly change the Void Mother's perception and make it more obedient to him. In reality, this was because he had borrowed Bu Shutian's Weili, which was why there was an additional layer of obstruction. If he had used his own strength, this situation would definitely not have occurred. This was also the reason why the myriad K star stream had so many primordial gods and monsters, but they couldn't control them as they pleased. Zhang Yan saw that the situation was about to take shape. After a moment's consideration, he gathered his qi and abruptly raised his magic power. Like a tidal wave, it surged forward layer by layer. This was to force the mastermind to respond. This way, even if the mastermind had other tricks he hadn't used yet, under such pressure, he wouldn't have the time to care about them. Chapter 1879. Ao Xiao and the others followed Qiu Chang's aura as they moved around the void and reality. Soon, they sensed that Song Shou's gaze was moving further and further away from them. It was as if Song Shou's gaze was gradually peeling away from them. Song Shou understood that they were trying to escape to a place where Song Shou's line of sight could not reach. The void and reality weren't just a single space. They were different spaces that were formed from the void to reality, and from reality to the void. The more spaces Song Shou occupied, the larger the space he occupied. The larger the space he occupied, the more space he occupied. The two spaces complemented each other. Since Song Shou existed in both the chaos realm and the real world, the situation here was even more complicated. Usually, even if one knew of the existence of this blind spot, it would be very difficult to find it. Fortunately, Qiu Chong had first used the golden unicorn seal to enter the monster's body. He didn't hesitate to use his divine will and yuan qi to calculate the changes in the monster's body. That was how he managed to keep track of this weak spot. After an unknown period of time, Ao Xiao and Cheng Li felt their bodies lighten. The malicious intent that had been lingering around them also disappeared. They understood that they had escaped from the monster's gaze. However, they had only hidden in a blind spot and hadn't truly left, so they could still observe this monster. When the three of them arrived, they didn't hesitate and immediately chose to attack. Song Shou realized that the three of them had suddenly disappeared from his sight. Just as he was about to search for their whereabouts, he felt his body being attacked. However, he couldn't find where his enemies were. Nothing in this world was perfect. Even ancient monsters were the same. Even though Song Shou could return to his original form, he couldn't repair this weak spot in his body. He couldn't erase it through cultivation either. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't fight back. He immediately twisted his body and switched between the real world and the void realm. As he deliberately dodged the attacks, the weak spot in his body kept changing. Qiu Chong also saw this change. He immediately deduced where Song Shou could hide. Not only did he keep a close eye on it, he also increased the intensity of his attacks. At this moment, if he were to be stared at by the monster's eyes again, even though all his previous efforts wouldn't go to waste, he would still have to waste an opportunity. The monster's endurance increased with each attack, so he had to try his best to kill it in one go. It would be best if there were no interruptions during the process. On the 1K Alliance's side, sect leader Ban and the rest were still watching the battle. Their current location was also within the range of Song Shou's gaze. Hence, just now, they were also turned around. Because they were only watching from the side and did not participate in the battle, they were stunned for a moment before they understood what was going on. It was also because their cultivation was limited that they did not immediately react when they saw Ao Xiao and the rest's actions. Hence, they only understood what they were doing after a long while. Sect Master Liao anxiously said, "Sect Master Ban, this is an opportunity, should we go down and help?" Sect Master Ban also saw the crux of the matter. The demonic gods believers had now grasped Song Shou's weakness and were taking advantage of the situation to attack fiercely. As long as he and the rest went up to block them, the ancient monster would be able to cover up his weakness. If that was the case, the demonic gods believers would have to start from the beginning if they wanted to find this place again. Furthermore, with this ancient monster blocking them for a day, the Alliance's disciples behind them would be able to live in peace for a day. Furthermore, after they had ruined the demonic gods believers' plan, they might be able to borrow this monster's hand to kill the demonic gods believers. The benefits of this were too great. Right now, they had seen most of what they could see. Even if they lost this clone, it would not be a problem. Rather than letting it disappear on its own, they might as well use it here. After considering all these, he said in a deep voice, "All right, we will go up and block these demonic gods believers." At the same time, He Xianin, Mei Ruoqing, and Fan Shu were guarding the outer perimeter. They held a jade plate in their hands to prevent the mystical serpent from resurrecting at any time. As they were watching the battle, they suddenly sensed a malicious intent. He glanced at a certain spot in the void and immediately transmitted his divine will to Ao Xiao and the rest. "Fellow Taoists, just now, those spying on us seem to be heading in your direction. Do you want me to go up and block them?" Ao Xiao said, Thank you for your reminder, Heavenly Lord He. You don't have to go up. Just now, Sect Master Wei has already made arrangements after receiving your report. He Xianyi nodded. Since they were already prepared, he would stay at his original spot and not move. Just now, Sect Leader Ban and the other three moved. Before they could get close to Ao Shao and the rest, they felt their bodies freeze. They saw Heavenly Lord Yi Hongtu of the Observance Heaven, Heavenly Lord Fang Ji of the Accumulated Victory Heaven, Heavenly Lord Ling Yinxing of the Isu Heaven, and Heavenly Lord Di Fenghe of the Circumference Heaven, blocking their path. Sect Leader Ban sighed in his heart. He knew that it was impossible to block them this time. He shouted, "Retreat!" The other three sect leaders did not plan to stay and fight either. After all, they were only clones. If they fought with someone for a long time, they would dissipate sooner or later. Apart from wasting their underworld divine essence, they would not gain any benefits. Instead, they would expose even more secrets. Therefore, when they saw that their plan had failed, they retreated without hesitation. Yi Hongtu sneered and said, "Since you've come, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Am I not treating my guests well?" With a flick of his sleeve, a beam of green and red light flew out and circled around the four of them in a circle. Under the protection of this transcendent artifact, the fading figures of the four of them reappeared once again. They felt as if they were trapped inside. Sect Leader Pai was about to use his theurgy to resolve this, but he heard Sect Leader Ban's voice in his heart. "Sect Leader Pai, don't attack. Otherwise, we will find out what you've done." He immediately came to his senses and stopped his attack. When the four heaven masters saw him reappear, they immediately attacked with lightning bolts. This was supposed to be a probe, so the power of the lightning bolts was not that great. However, to their surprise, the four heaven masters did not put up any resistance at all. When the lightning bolts struck them, they were all turned into smoke and were easily killed by the four heaven masters. Yi Hongtu was slightly surprised. He retracted his transcendent artifact and thought, "Looks like this junior is only a clone. I can't tell him apart at all. I should inform my fellow Taoists later so that he can use this to escape the next time we meet." As a precaution, Ao Shao and the others held back their attacks. Now that the threat had been eliminated, they no longer had any scruples. The three of them activated their theurgy and transcendent artifacts and attacked Song Shou's body continuously. Song Shou suffered losses again and again. When he realized that he couldn't find the three of them, he roared at the sky. In an instant, the void trembled and his body suddenly collapsed. In the next moment, his body gathered in one spot again. Ao Shao and the others were only slightly dazed. When they thought about it, they realized that this deity had just now Song Shou had killed himself. The three of them couldn't help but become serious. Although Song Shou couldn't return to his original place and couldn't retrieve the parts of his body that they had lost earlier, his resistance against their magic power had increased. If he could kill himself again and again, he might be able to completely block their magic power and theurgy. Although such a change was not without its limitations, the three of them still felt that it was a little troublesome. This was because they had to kill him before his magic power lost its effect. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to pose a threat to him anymore. When Qiu Chong thought of this, he immediately said, "This monster can certainly resist our theurgy and magic power, but he definitely can't fight against our fellow Taoists who have never met him before. Otherwise, apart from a true young almighty being, I'm afraid no one in this world can subdue him. Why don't we call for our fellow Taoists to attack together and kill this monster as soon as possible?" Ao Shao didn't hesitate. He summoned his divine will and immediately received a response. Yi Hongtu and the other three were not far away from him. At this moment, they also joined the battle. Under the joint attack of 7 Duju cultivators, Song Shou immediately felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. After a long time, he killed himself again in an attempt to salvage the situation. However, this couldn't prevent his death. Not long after, his body started to show signs of collapsing. Once this happened, it became more and more intense. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't save himself from his imminent death. Sect Leader Ban and the others' consciousness had already returned to their original bodies. They could see that the huge eye was slowly shattering. At this moment, they could already foresee the deity's fate. Sect leader Liao said, "Sect leader Ban, should we go and save him?" Sect leader Ban shook his head and said, "It's useless. These demon gods believers have already found a way to subdue Zhang. It's too late to go and save him now." He was also a little regretful. If he had been determined from the start, he might have been able to salvage the situation by pressing forward with his real body. As he was thinking, he suddenly felt a tremor in his mind. When he looked again, he saw a vortex exploding in the void. Countless Zhang's broken limbs were being sucked into it. However, this time, they probably wouldn't be able to return. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then, he opened his eyes again and said with a determined expression, "Everyone, the demon gods believers are about to kill their way here. I hope that everyone can work together to fight against the enemy. Everyone with a strong will, help me reverse the heavens and bring order to the world." Within the 5 heavens, Bai Wei and the others watched as the cultivators killed Zhang and then pressed down on Ao Qitian. They knew that the living beings of this realm couldn't stop the former's attack. At this rate, the myriad K-star stream would soon fall into the hands of the people of humanity. Qi Yao glanced at a certain place and said playfully, "That person hasn't made a move yet. It seems that he doesn't have any more tricks up his sleeves." Heng Jing's divine will transmitted a message. The myriad K-star stream is no longer a place to live. It's better for us to return to the void essence sea. At least, the people of humanity hasn't occupied this place yet. He was also glad that he didn't do anything to the people of humanity in this battle. Most of the time, he was just a bystander. If they had done something that crossed the bottom line of the people of humanity, they probably wouldn't have let them leave no matter what. Deng Zhang sensed their intention to retreat and said, "Let's wait a little longer. It's impossible that this person didn't leave any way out. He must have some tricks that he hasn't used yet. If we leave now, we might miss it." Qi Yao changed his mind. Perhaps he had thought of the future. He smiled and said, "All right, let's listen to Deng Shangzhen." In a void realm of the myriad K-star stream, a blurry figure was sitting there. At the moment when Zhang was killed, this person seemed to have realized that this place couldn't be defended anymore. "If we can't win this round, we'll just have to try again in the next round." This person sensed the location of the broken world and knew that the exalted Lu Hua had already made preparations and was just waiting for him to move in. "Forget it. It's time to go." This person didn't wait for the moment when the myriad K-star stream was truly broken. He carried the Weili that he had stolen from Bu Su Tian and tried to move it into the broken world. Chapter 1880. As soon as the blurry figure withdrew his mana, he felt Zhang Yan's mana surging towards him. However, he did not care much about it. As long as he reached the broken world, it would not matter even if the 1K galaxy stream was destroyed. Everything could be restarted from the beginning. However, just as he was about to move, he felt a tremor and was blocked by a huge force. It was as if he had crashed into a giant wall, causing him to stop in his tracks. The blurry figure said angrily, "Demon Lord Qizhou?" He could feel that this force came from the barrier between the two worlds. It was clearly the work of the Demon Lord who was guarding this place. Although he had schemed against this Demon Lord and wanted to drag him into the trap, he thought that even if the Demon Lord refused, he would at most stay out of the matter and would not interfere. He did not expect that the Demon Lord would come to stop him at this time. At this time, because he had suddenly withdrawn his mana just now, there was a huge gap. Thus, Zhang Yan's monstrous mana continued to fill in the gap and continued to invade the remaining space. This person realized that he might not be able to escape at the moment. Without thinking too much, he hurriedly used his mana again and held on to the last bit of the boundary. Because he had lost the upper hand, there was no hope of staying here. Thus, if he wanted to escape now, he could only find a way to escape again. Previously, he did not expect that someone would come to stop him. There was no sign in his senses, so he was not prepared. However, if he could use all his strength and break through the barrier, there was a chance that he could break out. Moreover, He thought that perhaps this demon lord was only unhappy that he had dragged him into the trap just now, so he took revenge on him. Now that the cause and effect had been settled, perhaps the demon lord would withdraw. Thus, he quieted down again and prepared to make a breakthrough later. Zhang Yan snorted coldly when he saw the person retreat. He had previously thought that although this person had chosen to merge with the 1K galaxy stream, it was difficult to guarantee that he would have a way out. However, he did not need to care about this. As long as he stopped the person from moving out, then everything would be fine. His body of strength was the key to stopping the person from escaping. In reality, the combination of qi and power had already surpassed his opponent. However, because his opponent was using Bu Shutian's Weili, his magic power was also limitless. If he wanted to defeat him like this, the process would be extremely long. 10,000 years was only the shortest. If there were any more variables, then not only would he be unable to deal with it, it was extremely likely that this killer move would be exposed in advance. So, he would rather choose to attack from the general trend of karma. But now that he sensed that the other party had the intention to escape, he immediately activated his body of strength and successfully blocked the other party's path. He only had to slowly push forward without revealing any flaws, and he would be able to completely trap the Weili within this heavenly world. Once the situation below was established, he would be able to directly arrive in front of the Weili and retrieve the Weili that had been stolen. Within the myriad K star stream, after Zhang Shou was killed, the whirlpool he created also wiped out all the monsters in the void. As for the strange serpent, it was suppressed by He Xianyin and the other two. Even though countless living beings were killed, the 4 qi did not cause it to reappear. Wei Zihong saw that the area in front of the 9 platforms palace city was empty, so he released many dragon demons and insects to protect the surroundings. Only then did he activate the palace city and continue to press in the direction of Aochi World Land. As he gradually approached the land in front of him, he said, "Today, we must complete our mission. We must not let this person escape. Sect leader Sima, fellow Taoist Peng, the two of you must think of a way to keep an eye on him." Sima Quan replied, "Sect leader Wei, our clones will keep an eye on the sect elders and clan leaders of the various sections. If anyone escapes, we will be able to detect it immediately." Wei Zihong nodded and said, "Then I'll leave it to the two of you." If it was in the void primordial sea, there were many ways to prevent others from passing through the void. However, in the myriad K star stream, all the larger voids had cracks that were connected to the void. It could be said that there were loopholes everywhere. He did not have many subordinates, so he could only keep an eye on them. He could not block all the cracks. Fortunately, he could still continue his pursuit within the void. Even if he escaped outside, it was not impossible to find him. On the Aochi World Land, the 1K disciples saw the 9 platforms palace city approaching, and they could not help but panic. They were originally filled with fear towards the followers of the demon god. Just now, they had personally witnessed Zhang Shou's death, and they could not help but feel even more terrified. Even the ancient monsters were killed. How could they stop them? At this time, if not for the various clan leaders restraining them, many of the disciples would have already fled in all directions. Sect leader Gua saw that the situation was not right and said in a low voice, "Sect leader Ban, the hearts of the sects are wavering. If we do not find a way to boost their morale, I'm afraid it will not be good. We might as well release the cloud ball in advance to stop the enemy's momentum." Sect leader Ban thought for a while and said yes. With his permission, sect leader Gua went to make arrangements. Not long after, many smooth and exquisite jade balls floated in the air, and soon covered the area where the void of Aochi World Land and the void of the Aochi World Land. Because the light of the sun and the moon dyed it, it shone brilliantly and looked like a bright belt of stars, blocking the 9 platforms palace city and the land. Wei Zihong also noticed these things, and out of caution he did not continue forward, but ordered the insects and dragon demons to go forward to test it first. A large group of dragon demonic insects quickly rushed in. At first, the stone ball quietly floated in the air, but when it was halfway through and the jade belt was about to come out, it suddenly collided with each other and rolled, crushing it into a pool of flesh and blood. In just a short while, all the living things that went deep into it died. Originally, there were many cultivators following behind, but when they saw this scene, their expressions changed, and they stopped for a moment, not daring to go forward. After a while, they used their magic power to bombard these jade balls, to see if they could clear a path. However, these jade balls were extremely sturdy, and even if they were damaged, they would recover in a few breaths' time. Even if they were destroyed, the land below would continue to release more to fill in the gaps, so the speed of advancing was very slow. Wei Zihong asked his left and right, sect leader Sima, fellow Taoist Peng, do you two know what these are? Sima Quan said, these things are called cloud summoning pills. They are refined from the corpses of powerful gods and monsters, and can be considered a kind of blood tool. They were forged in a secret domain, and were only moved here these past 2 days. That's why we didn't know about this beforehand, and only then did we find some clues. Wei Zihong waved his hand and said, don't worry, it won't be harder to deal with than the formation. He was just about to find a heavenly master to solve this matter, when Qi Xiaolon, who was standing behind, had a thought, and he took the initiative to step forward, bowed and said, Sect Leader Wei, I have a way to break this thing. Wei Zihong smiled and said, oh? Sect Leader Qi has a way? Qi Xiaolon said, our dragon realm has poisonous dragons, and their blood can corrode everything in the realm. As long as it is sprinkled from below, it will definitely be able to break a path. Wei Zihong knew that he wanted to make a contribution, and nodded, and said, since Sect Leader Qi is so confident, then I will leave this matter to you. Receiving his permission, Qi Xiaolon said, I will definitely not disappoint Sect Leader Wei. He bowed and left happily. Not long after, Wei Zihong saw a thin blood color spreading in the distant sky, and everywhere it passed, the jade balls were all corroded and melted. The starlight jade belt looked as if it was being chewed, and very soon, it became incomplete. Wei Zihong saw that the path had been opened, and was not surprised. He ordered the disciples to record Qi Xiaolon's merit, and then continued to move the palace forward. Sect leader Ban and the others originally hoped that this barrier would be able to stop the attacks from the opposite side, but they did not expect it to be broken so quickly. They were also shocked, and hurriedly gave another order, and said, have all the sect's guardians listen to my orders. Shortly after, smoke rose from the land of Aoqi, and when it reached the sky, many ferocious figures could be seen vaguely in the fog, and it was most of the guardians and deities of the sects who had been invited out. At a glance, there were at least 100 of them. If these deities were taken out individually, they might not be of much use in such a large-scale battle, but if they were to work together, they would be a force that could not be underestimated. The cultivators in the palace could feel that there were many tyrannical qi dynamics hidden within, and they were also a threat to themselves, so they all became vigilant. Wei Zihong pondered for a moment, and his divine will transmitted a message. Sect leader Tong Guang, Sect leader Gua, Elder Feng, Elder Guan, from now on, all the mortals in the palace are under the command of the 4 of you. Head down and hold back these deities. When the 4 of them agreed, he transmitted a message to Ao Shao and the others, and said, there are 4 people with the highest cultivation in this land. You don't have to care about the rest, and you must find this person and kill him. It was already close to the decisive battle, so apart from the divine beast, the black tortoise, he sent everyone out in one go. Sect leader Ban saw the bright light in the sky, and then a majestic qi dynamics flew out from the 9 Peaks Palace and headed towards the land. How could he not know that the demonic deities and deities believers had already launched their final attack? In the blink of an eye, he saw that Ao Shao and the others were coming towards him, and his pupils involuntarily shrank. Earlier, he had already seen that even Song Shou was unable to withstand their joint attack, and there were only 4 of them on his side. Even though they had also cultivated to the netherworld immeasurable stage, it was impossible for them to withstand their joint attack. Right now, they were the last hope of the 1K alliance. If even they were defeated, then they would definitely lose this battle. Therefore, they couldn't choose to fight recklessly. He shouted, Sect Leader Gua. Sect Leader Gua understood, and according to the plan they had discussed beforehand, he activated the strange power in his bloodline, and the four of them turned into a thin mist and fled to the top of the sky. When Ao Xiao and the others saw this, they naturally chased after them without any hesitation. Sect leader Guo was prepared to sense the qi dynamics and directly teleport to the four of them, but the aura of this person was so faint that he couldn't pinpoint it. He knew that this person was prepared, so he could only chase after them on the clear light. Sect leader Pai looked behind him and said anxiously, "The demonic deities and deities have caught up." Sect leader Ban said calmly, "Let's act according to the plan." Sect leader Guo let out a low roar, and the bloody radiance on his body surged. At this moment, a hole appeared in the sky above them, and the four of them disappeared in a flash. Ao Xiao frowned and transmitted his divine will. "Where is that?" Qiu Chong calculated and said, "It's just an emptiness realm, but it's not that simple. This person must have a plan." Ao Xiao's thoughts turned, and he made a prompt decision. "Heavenly Lord Cheng, Elder Qiu, please follow me. The rest of you stay here for now." After giving his instructions, he didn't waste any time and followed Cheng and Qiu Chong into the hole. Chapter 1881. The source of sect leader Guo's ancestral vein was the miserly sheep. It was also an ancient deity, but it was different from many of its kind. Although it slept in the realm of chaos for a long time, its blood would subconsciously escape into the world, and it would try to capture everything around it that could be devoured, then bring it back to its original body. However, in the process, it would inevitably encounter some extremely powerful natives that it did not kill. After coming into contact with its blood, they would unknowingly obtain its abilities, and thus leave behind many blood descendants. When Sect Master Guo was cultivating all those years ago, perhaps because of his bloodline, he had mistakenly entered the chaos realm and accidentally came into contact with this ancestral bloodline god-fiend. The latter did not have the habit of taking care of its own bloodline. Even though it was still in a deep slumber, its omnipresent power could devour all foreign living beings that had mistakenly entered this realm. He was lucky because a blood tool just happened to be constructed from his blood, and he relied on the fact that it wasn't devoured at the first possible moment to escape. Moreover, his strength improved greatly because of this, and he was able to enter this place at any time. However, he was fearful in his heart. Moreover, he found out that he wasn't the only bloodline descendant that had escaped, and all those who tried to return never came out again. So he'd never return to this place again. Now, he was prepared to use this point to lure the demon god believers that followed behind him into this realm. Then, even if he could not use the hands of the ancient deity to kill them, he could only trap the upper-level combat power of the demon god believers inside. Then, there would still be hope for him to lead the various sects to fight against them. However, he also knew that if he entered this realm right from the start, the demon god believers would definitely not be fooled. So, he planned to enter the realm of emptiness first, and then make a decision according to the specific situation. Sect leader Guo looked back and could not help but feel delighted when he saw that there were only a few people chasing after him. They had previously deduced that before they knew their intentions, it was very likely that the demon god believers would not dare to chase all of them. This way, they would achieve their goal of forcing their opponents to split up. If there were only a few people, if their strength was higher than theirs, they would maintain the original plan. If their strength was lower, they would stop and devour this force, then go out to deal with the rest. He said in a low voice, "There are only 3 demon god believers here. Should we turn back and fight?" Sect Master Pai, however, was a little uncertain, saying, "These are the 3 people who were the first to surround and attack Song Shou just now. These people are very powerful. Although we have a chance of winning, we might not be able to keep them here." Sect leader Ban pondered for a moment and said, "Now that we have entered the Void Realm, the other believers of the demonic gods may still be looking for an opportunity to escape into this place. To be on the safe side, we need to make a few more turns so that they cannot pursue us." The other 3 sect leaders didn't have much confidence either, so when they heard his words, they immediately agreed. Turning around, they continued deeper into the cave. After Ao Xiao and the others entered this space, They followed this person and traveled through several emptiness realms in an instant. At this moment, they were far away from the main world and were gradually approaching the border of the chaotic realm. Ao Xiao said in a deep voice, "It seems like he wants to lead us to a certain place." Cheng Li replied, "We wouldn't have gone through so much trouble if we could have captured Ji Ding. I wonder what kind of treasure he used." He had tried to capture Ji Ding a few times, but to no avail. He guessed that Ji Ding must have used some kind of protective technique. Qiu Chong calculated for a moment and said, "This person doesn't have any treasure on him. He must have made a special sacrifice to not be captured. He must have relied on the protection bestowed upon him by the Weili and his own foundation, which allowed him to avoid my divine art." Indeed, it was as he had guessed. After sect leader Ban and the others learned that they could capture Ji Ding, they had offered the Void Mother as a sacrifice in hopes that it would protect them. In the end, their wishes were fulfilled. However, not everyone could do it because they still had to use their own strength. If their own strength was insufficient, the Void Mother's protection wouldn't be of much use. They were only able to avoid being captured because their cultivation levels were similar to Ao Xiao and the others. Ao Xiao said coldly, "If I can't capture him, then I'll seal the sky." He took out a long ruler from his sleeve and swung it in front of him. Sect leader Ban soon felt that something was wrong. They realized that no matter how they moved, they could only circle around in the sky. They couldn't go deeper, and the followers of the demon gods were getting closer and closer to them. Sect leader Liao's expression darkened. He said, "This is bad. We must have fallen into a trap." Sect leader Pai felt uneasy. He said, "After the sacrifice, the followers of the demon gods won't be able to capture us for a while. Perhaps those treasures have sealed the sky." The four of them frowned. They realized that this was a tricky situation. They didn't have any good ideas to deal with treasures. Sect leader Ban thought for a moment and asked, "Sect leader Gua, can you still use that divine art of yours? If not, we'll have to plan ahead." Sect leader Gua said, "You don't have to worry about this. This divine art borrows the power of our ancestors' monsters. If we can still be blocked by treasures, then there's no need to fight anymore. We might as well admit defeat." Sect leader Ban nodded. "We're quite far away from Aoqitian. Since we can't escape now, let's stay and fight this person first." The other three sect leaders saw that they didn't have a good choice, so they turned around and prepared to face the enemy. When Ao Xiao saw that the four of them were no longer running away, he knew that a battle was imminent. He first used his divine will to communicate with Cheng and Qiu. Then, with a thought, a formation plate flew out. With a loud rumble, it enveloped the four of them. Formation plates were rarely seen in the Wankai aboriginals. Even though the cultivators who came to seek refuge knew a little about them, they were mostly low-level cultivators. Those who weren't proficient in this Tao didn't know much about them. Thus, they had always treated them as a type of treasure. When the four of them saw the formation plate descending, they immediately activated their blood tools to protect themselves. They dodged it at the same time. However, this method of dealing with treasures was useless against a formation plate. They only felt their divine senses blur and found themselves in an area that was overflowing with light. There were thunderous noises in their ears and gusts of wind blowing above their heads. With just a gentle brush, a layer of the light from the blood tools and treasures on their bodies was shaved off. Sect leader Ban looked around but couldn't find Ao Xiao and the others at all. There was no way he could fight them. He immediately realized that the techniques of the devil god's believers he saw earlier were far from all they had. He pressed on his heart acupoint and activated his blood vessels. Immediately, his eyes turned red. In his eyes, everything in the outside world was divided into 3 layers. These were the exterior, interior, and middle emptiness. He could move freely in these layers and avoid the calamity. After a few breaths, he found a feasible path. He immediately said, "Sect leaders, please get on my body." Sect leader Pai said, "Wait for me to use my secret technique. Don't resist." When he finished speaking, he activated the strange power in his blood vessels. In a split second, he, Gua, and Liao turned into a wisp of smoke and attached themselves to sect leader Ban's body. It looked as if they had become one person. Sect leader Ban ignored the light that landed on his body and followed the path to break out of this place. No matter what kind of formation plate or restriction it was, there were strong and weak ones when it was activated. The place he was walking on was the weakest part of the defense. It was also the most suitable path to get out of this place. When Ao Xiao saw this from the outside, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect to be able to use this method to escape. If it was just a formation plate, he would really be able to get out. However, now that he was the master, there was no way he would let them escape so easily. He took out a spell and the formation plate was activated. All the changes in the formation were more than 100 times more complicated than just now. Sect leader Ban was instantly dazzled. The path in front of him was still there, but it was fleeting. Most of the time, he could only see it. When he reached that place, it would turn on its own. After looking for a long time, he felt a sense of exhaustion. He was shocked. This kind of supernatural power didn't come without a price. The more he used it, the greater the consumption. Based on the current situation, it meant that the divine essence of the underworld he absorbed from the void could no longer keep up with his current consumption. Thoughts flashed through his mind and he said, "Sect leader Gua, the situation isn't good. Quickly send me over there." Blood Qi flashed, and sect leader was separated from his body. He then took out a golden box and opened it. Several drops of blood flew out. This was the blood of Qian Yang. With this item, he could borrow the power of the ancestral deity to trap all the living beings in the surroundings into a chaotic realm. The closer one was to the chaotic realm, the higher the chance of success. Of course, the ancient deity wouldn't separate them. Perhaps it would devour all of them at once. However, he understood that the entire 1K void was fighting against the demon god's believers. With the void mother at the top, there was a high chance that they could control the will of the deity. The instant Ao Xiao and the others saw the blood essence, they fell into a trance. Then, they fell into an illusory world. Their surroundings were hazy and nothing existed. They felt as if they wanted to sleep and never wake up again. At the same time, they also felt an ominous aura coming from everywhere looking for them. After sensing that something was wrong, the three of them shifted their consciousness and entered an unknown realm. Because they had encountered a similar aura before, it wasn't difficult for them to deduce that they had fallen into a realm where the ancient deity was slumbering. Cheng Li said, "This realm is the territory of the deity. If we fight here, we won't have much chance of winning. We need to think of a way to get out. Elder Chiu, do you have any ideas?" It wouldn't be a big deal if they were just fighting the ancient deity. However, he could sense that the situation here was different from the outside world. There seemed to be a power that was constantly weakening them, and they had no choice but to use their magic power to resist it. This was a huge disadvantage, so they had to leave this place first. Elder Chiu made some calculations and shook his head. "I can't do it in a short while." Ao Xiao saw that they couldn't leave this place for the time being, so he said, "I need to report what happened here to Jiutai Palace City. If those 4 people turn back, we need to be careful." Daoran Qiuzhang said, "You don't need to worry about that, fellow Taoist. I can sense that those 4 people are still here, and they're trapped here just like me. They've probably used themselves as bait to lure us here." Ao Xiao nodded. "That'll be easy. Even if Ao Qitian doesn't have us, we can still suppress those natives." Wei Zihong was currently presiding over the situation in the palace. Things were progressing smoothly here because 1K's strongest combatants weren't present, and the guardian deities were being surrounded and killed one by one. Once they were all eliminated, Ao Qitian wouldn't have any power left to fight against them. At this moment, he suddenly felt Ao Xiao's consciousness transmitting to him, and he quickly learned of the situation over there. Even if the 4 1K Alliance's sect masters were able to return, he would still be able to deal with them. Thus, he said decisively, "The 3 of you don't need to get entangled with those ancient deities. If necessary, you can sacrifice your avatars. Once I've settled this place, I'll invite the Black Tortoise Venerable over to help the 3 of you escape." Chapter 1882. After Ao Xiao and the others received Wei Zihong's reply, they discussed among themselves and decided that they could fight the enemy here first. If the situation was truly unfavorable, they would abandon their clones and leave. Cultivator Du Ju's main body was in the realm beyond heaven. They had only sent a clone here, so even if they were to leave, they would not be harmed in the slightest. The only flaw was that the next time they appeared in the real world, they would still land at the place where their previous clone had disappeared. Of course, it would not be appropriate for them to stay here for too long. However, they judged that it would not take long for Wei Zihong to subdue Ao Chi Tian. If the Black Tortoise and Cultivator Du Ju were here, it would not be difficult for them to subdue this ancient god. Therefore, they did not need to worry too much. After they came to an agreement, they first went after sect leader Ban and the others. However, they could not find them. They did not know whether they had used some kind of method to conceal themselves, or if the situation here was unique. Thus, they only had one choice left, and that was to attack this ancient god that seemed to be everywhere in their perception. Logically speaking, since this ancient god had not taken the initiative to attack them, they could remain motionless for now. However, even if they did so, they would still be corroded by the evil aura that was everywhere around them. The longer they stayed here, the weaker they would be. In the end, they might not even be able to resist. The three of them were either the masters of a realm or the elders of a large sect. How could they possibly avoid battle and allow themselves to be slaughtered? Therefore, it was better for them to attack first. Even if they were defeated, they would only be abandoning their clones. Of course, there was another important reason for this. Just now, Qiu Chong had painstakingly deduced that dealing with this ancient god would be the most beneficial to them in the future. Daoran Qiu Chong was a profound cultivator. Since he had made such a decision, Ao Xiao and Cheng Li chose to trust him even though they did not know why. When they first entered the chaotic realm, this miserly sheep was still in a deep slumber. However, Ao Xiao, sect leader Ban, and the other three were enough to pose a threat to it, so it slowly woke up. When it sensed that someone was attacking it, it immediately opened its mouth and swallowed. This ancient god had a special ability that allowed it to swallow anything it saw and use it to nourish itself. However, this depended on the opponent. If the opponent was at the same level as it might not succeed in one go. Ao Xiao and the others suddenly felt a suffocating evil aura pressing down on them, as if it wanted to suck them into a place where they could not feel anything. They immediately tried to calculate and used their vitality to look into the future. Almost immediately, they knew that this ancient god was trying to swallow them. Once it succeeded, they would not be able to come out no matter how powerful their magic or how powerful they were. However, they could also see that this attack wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was aimed at the very core of the living being, which was the essence, aura, spirit, and form. However, if these were gone, then they wouldn't exist. After noticing this, they didn't dodge. Instead, they immediately formed a hand seal, and in a split second, a clear qi gushed out from each of their heads. At the same time, a huge shadow flashed past them. However, the three of them were unscathed. This was a technique they used to deal with the ancient god. They had used a technique to protect their vitality. The strength of their doppelgangers and their true bodies were linked together. The two of them were now one. Unless this ancient god could swallow their true bodies in the heavens beyond heaven, it would not be able to do anything to them. However, this was actually impossible unless their true bodies descended from the heavens beyond heaven. Even if they did that, the ancient god might not be able to do as it wished in one go. It might have to try many times before it could succeed. After Ao Xiao and the others dodged the attack, they realized that they had suffered some losses. Everyone could feel that some of their vitality had been taken away. On top of that, the omnipresent chaotic realm was weakening them. Although they could meet again, it would definitely be more difficult for them to come down. However, since they had chosen to fight, they would drag it out for as long as they could. Ever since sect leader Ban and the others had entered this space, they had been extremely afraid that the ancient god would attack them instead of the demon god's followers. However, when they saw that Ao Xiao and the others had actually taken the initiative to provoke the ancient god, they were extremely delighted. This way, Even if the ancient god still wanted to find them, it would definitely wait until it had devoured the demon god's believers. However, after watching the battle for a while, sect leader Ban frowned. He felt that something was wrong. It was as if he had overlooked something. Sect leader Liao said, "We should join the battle and try our best to kill these three." Sect leader Gua said, "There's no need for that. Miserly Sheep doesn't know that we are going to help him. If we join in now, he will inevitably see us as an enemy. It's better to wait until the demon god's believers are almost exhausted before we find an opportunity." Sect leader Pai was worried about the people in the sect. He suggested, "In my opinion, we should leave this realm first. We still need to take care of Ao Chitian." Sect leader Gua shook his head and said, "No, that's not right. We will still attract the ancient god's attention. If we abandon this ancient god and attack me first, we will be making a fool of ourselves." After a pause, he said to the three patiently, "We have the protection of the blood tools that we refined beforehand. We are not afraid of the chaotic realm's power. However, these demon gods' believers are different. They won't be able to hold out for long. It won't be too late to leave when they are about to be defeated." Sect leader Liao sighed. This miserly sheep ancient god seems to lack some intelligence. Otherwise, he would have been able to deal with this ancient god much faster. When sect leader Ban heard this, he suddenly realized what the problem was. Originally, the ancient gods and monsters were chaotic and had no intelligence to speak of. However, after the invasion of the demonic believers, the gods and monsters that appeared were no longer like this. He believed that there was a great power behind this, and it was very likely that it was the Void Mother. Although this was different from what he knew in the past, no matter where this power came from, it was on their side. Only an ancient god with a clear mind would be able to cause enough trouble for his opponent. However, the miserly sheep's current appearance was far from what he had expected. But why was there such a difference? He suddenly felt a little uneasy. He could only think that they had taken the initiative to enter the Chaos Realm, so this monster hadn't really been noticed by the mighty force. If they went deeper, although he had some bad guesses, he didn't dare to think too much about it. Actually, this was because the Void Mother had no concept of good or evil, right or wrong. Everything it did in the past was forced upon it by the person behind it. But now, Zhang Yan's mana had taken over half of the Void Realm. Although he still couldn't control the Void Mother, he could suppress the person behind it to the point where he couldn't move. Bai Wei and the others didn't dare to interfere, so naturally, there wouldn't be any more powerful beings who would bestow intelligence to the Void Mother. On the battlefield, the pressure on Ao Shao and the other two greatly increased because miserly sheep had completely awakened at this moment. After fighting for a long time, their auras continued to weaken. Seeing that there was no hope of victory, Ao Shao used his spirit will and transmitted a message. "Fellow Taoists, there is no need to continue fighting here. You can withdraw now." Cheng Li acted according to their plan. He first took out the mountain-shaped brush holder, and when miserly sheep tried to swallow them again, he withdrew his magic power and abandoned this clone. All of his essence, chi, spirit, and will returned to the sky beyond heaven. At the same time, Ao Shao and Elder Chiu did the same. Sect leader Ban and the others were stunned when the three of them suddenly disappeared from the battlefield. Sect leader Liao was half surprised and half delighted. He said, "Could it be that these believers of the demon gods have been swallowed?" Sect leader Gua observed for a moment and said, "No." He didn't know how Ao Shao and the others had disappeared, but he was sure that they hadn't been swallowed by miserly sheep. At this moment, the four of them felt a wave of malice envelop their bodies, and they couldn't help but be startled. Clearly, this ancient god had turned around to look for them after losing its prey. Sect leader Gua sensed that something was wrong, and he hurriedly activated his secret technique to escape. However, at this moment, a mountain-shaped brush holder suddenly appeared in midair. The surrounding air sank, and they were unable to move. However, this delay allowed miserly sheep to swallow the three of them in one gulp. In Jiotian Palace, Wei Zihong looked ahead. Right now, all the enlightenment cultivators and mortal slew cultivators were truly joining forces to attack the guardian deities and monsters. If no additional forces joined the battle, or if the 4 sect leaders who had comprehended the underworld boundless realm didn't return, this battle would end in about 2 or 3 days. After that, they could easily wipe out the remaining people. He pondered for a moment, then said to Sima Quan and Peng Xiang, "You can activate those arrangements now." Sima Quan bowed and said, "We'll do it right now." When he and Peng Xiang were lurking in Ouchi Heaven, they had infected the natives of this world. Although it wasn't very effective against the sect elders who possessed the underworld divine essence, many of the blood descendants were unknowingly poisoned. They didn't just use divine abilities and spells, they also sent demons to bewitch and persuade them to surrender, trying to break them down from the inside. Because the 1K heavens saw that the situation was hopeless, and the alliance was not united, many people were instigated to defect. Now was the time to mobilize these people. At this moment, after the 2 of them passed down their orders, those sects immediately attacked their own people. At the same time, countless demons appeared to cooperate with them, instantly causing chaos in the rear corners of the alliance's formation. Originally, they could only barely defend against the attacks of the cultivators. Now, the situation became even worse. Many of the defensive forces in the territories immediately collapsed, and the collapse continued to spread to other places. Not long after, other than the remaining guardian gods and monsters and the core members of the dozen or so large sects who were still stubbornly resisting, there were not many people in the rest of the realms who were holding on. Wei Zihong also didn't expect that an unimportant chess piece he had set up in the background would have such a huge effect. It could only be said that the other side was already on the verge of collapse under their continuous pressure. Coupled with the fact that the person in charge had not returned for a long time, they collapsed so quickly. He discussed with the true gods in the divine will for a while and decided not to hold back anymore. He immediately sent out all the forces at hand other than the Black Tortoise, hoping to exterminate all of them. In the Qinghuan Palace, Zhang Yan also saw this scene. He looked at the river of heavenly secrets, and now the situation was completely tilted towards his side. Even if the other side had any chess pieces or hidden strings, it was impossible for them to turn the tables. He shook his sleeves and slowly stood up, then looked at Wan Kejishu. Next, it was time to face this person. Chapter 1883. Zhang Yan sensed for a moment, and with a change of heart, he instantly entered the land of extreme void. Now that his spiritual power had occupied a large portion of the 1K star stream, it could be said that most of the world was under his control. Hence, he could easily enter this place. The blurry figure sat there and said in a deep voice, "You've finally come." Just now, he tried a few more times, but he still could not break through the heaven and earth lock. He knew that he had lost this round, and there was no way out. But he still had to put in some effort. Zhang Yan looked over and saw that the other was indeed just an incarnation of essence qi. Because he had fused with Bu Shutian's Weili, he was constantly drawing endless mana from it to replenish himself. But after all, he did not have the form to stay in this world, so the damage was irreversible. If this person did not do anything, then he could still maintain this form for a long time, and even if he found Zhou Huanyuan Jade in the future, he could still come back. But because he was fighting against his strength, this process was greatly reduced. Now, this person's figure was blurry, like a shadow. This was probably because he did not want to use up too much essence qi, so he did not spend energy to maintain his appearance. Standing there, he could faintly feel that there was a barrier between him and this person that he could not cross. This was because this person was still controlling the last bit of power in Bu Shutian's Weili, so he was not completely suppressed. That was fast. Once Wei Zihong settled down, he would have complete control of the heaven secrets. Then, he would be able to retrieve the heavenly Sumer mighty force. Once he was done with that, Wei Zihong would vanish into thin air. But he did not want to do this now because he wanted to know why this person was blocking him. Also, this person was likely to know some secrets about Bu Shutian, which was worth investigating. He said, "How should I address you, sir?" The blurry figure said, I am a person who has forgotten my name, and I should not exist in this world. But because of a stubborn thought, I forced myself to stay. If you want to address me, you can call me Juan Quebec. Zhang Yan's heart stirred slightly. Although he spoke in a secretive manner, he could clearly sense from his words that the reason why he didn't say his name wasn't as simple as forgetting his name. He was afraid that if he said it, it would attract the attention of certain people. Who was this almighty who could borrow Busu's Weili afraid of? He said, You once stole the Weili from Busu Tian. Today, I have come here to retrieve it. 1K replied, I have lost and cannot stop you. However, I will give you a word of advice. Even if you take the power back, do not try to pry into Bu Shutian's secrets and do not take that step. He warned 1K in a solemn tone. Zhang Yan just smiled faintly. Looks like you won't give up. It was not difficult for Taoist 1K to see his attitude. He was silent for a moment and said, Back then, I was just like you, wanting to peek into the upper realm. But you had no idea what you were going to face. If this was just about you, why would I care about you? If you insist on doing this, not only will you be dragging down your sect and all the beings in Bu Su Tian's void primal sea. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. Oh, what do you mean? 1K said, You only need to take a look to know that from the first to the third era, no one in the heavens has ever been able to pry into the upper realm. Instead, many almighty beings have disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. You mean this has something to do with the path to the upper realm? Taoist 1K only sneered and did not explain the specific reason. Zhang Yan tried to ask again, but he was unwilling to speak no matter what. Zhang Yan pondered in his heart. It was very likely that this person was deliberately mystifying things in order to survive, but it was also possible that what he said was the truth. However, Zhang Yan did not intend to do anything to him. Although he did not know the identity of this person when he was alive, he clearly knew many things that he did not know. Keeping him alive was more useful than killing him. He sensed that even though this person was still holding on to his last bit of arcane energy, the Void Mother's consciousness was still fading. When it completely disappears, he would be able to leave his mark on the world and retrieve the Weili without going through this person. Then, he would be able to pry into the depths of Bu Su Tian. In the sky above Ao Chi Tian, two silhouettes materialized one after the other. They were sect leader Ban and sect leader Gua. When the ancient deity, the miserly goat, lost track of Ao Shao and the others in the chaotic realm, naturally targeted the four of them. In the end, after a bitter battle, the two of them managed to escape, but Pai and Liao were swallowed by the deity. Although they might not be dead yet, there was no one who could save them. Therefore, the outcome was predictable. After they appeared, the scene they saw was the sects fleeing in all directions. More than half of the tower locked by the Blood Rainbow Lock had collapsed, and only a few dozen guardian gods and monsters and some sect elders were still resisting. It was only a matter of time before they were destroyed. Sect leader Gua's heart sank. He said sadly, Did we do something wrong? Just now, it seems that we should not leave and stay here to fight the demon god's believers. Sect leader Ban shook his head. Just now, our strategy is correct. It's just that the demon god's believers are stronger than we expected. It's not our fault. The four of them taking the initiative to leave had indeed caused the most important forces to be lost in the battlefield. Moreover, the people who were recommended by the sects were not around, so it was inevitable that they would panic. However, it was precisely because they were no match for the demon god's believers that they could only try to divide the demon god's believers and find an opportunity from the impossible. It would be good if they could survive, but even if they couldn't, they would have done their best. At this moment, they suddenly felt a sense of panic, as if something important was disappearing. After sensing it carefully, they realized that the omnipresent consciousness in the world was gradually disappearing. This caused their expressions to change drastically. This meant that the natural order of this world had collapsed. Sect leader Ban said slowly, Let's surrender. Surrender? Sect leader Gua was already prepared to face the disaster. Now that he suddenly wanted to surrender to the demon god's believers, he was at a loss. Sect leader Ban said, Sect leader Gua, have you not noticed that we can't even get much of the divine essence of the nether space? This means that the 1K star stream has changed. Maybe the demon god has already entered the world. What's the point of continuing to fight? It's better to surrender to the demon god's believers. Not only can we save our lives, we can also let our disciples and sect leader live. Sect leader Gua sighed. After a while, he said, but if we do this, we'll be letting down those who recommended us. Sect leader Ban shook his head. Why did you recommend us? Sect leader Gua, it's not like you don't know. If they can surrender, why can't we? Sect leader Gua thought about it and agreed. The 1K alliance was originally a loose alliance. There was no need for them to place too much importance on this position. If it wasn't for the previous few sacrificial ceremonies that allowed them to cross the boundary, they would be no different from the other sections. There was no need for them to shoulder all the burden. He nodded and sighed. All right. After the discussion, the two of them headed toward Jiotai Palace. However, to avoid unnecessary attacks, the two of them traveled very slowly. At this moment, there was a flash of light in the sky, and several figures surrounded them. The heavenly master Yi Hongtu looked at them indifferently and said, the 1K star stream has lost its power, and the alliances are about to disperse. If the two of you know what's good for you, then surrender. Sect leader Ban raised his hand and bowed. We are here to surrender. Yi Hongtu was slightly surprised. Just now, he had only said it casually. He didn't expect them to surrender. Thanks to the information sent by Sima Quan and Peng Xiang, he had some understanding of the upper echelons of the alliances. Thus, he recognized the two of them the moment he saw them. He had thought that these people would fight to the death. However, this was good. These two were not weak. It would be troublesome to take them down. He shook his sleeve and two talismans floated down. Ban and Gua did not move. When the edict came near, it turned into a ray of light and entered their bodies. In a split second, the two of them felt that their blood vessels were being suppressed. Other than being able to fly in the air, they could not use any secret techniques. They understood that at this moment, they had lost even the last bit of their power to protect themselves. They could only listen to the devil god's followers. Yi Hongtu escorted the two of them to Jiotai Palace and ordered someone to report. When Wei Zihong received the news, he was slightly surprised. Considering the identity of the two of them, he decided to meet them. He called them into the hall and asked them a few questions. Only then did he know what happened to them. Sect leader Ban took the initiative and said, just now, I saw that there are still many people resisting. I am willing to go with sect leader Gua to persuade them to surrender. I only hope that the Lord will give us a chance to redeem ourselves. As he said this, he bowed deeply toward the hall. Wei Zihong thought for a moment. Although it wouldn't take long for him to kill these people by relying on his own strength, his most important goal was to occupy this world as soon as possible. For this goal, everything else could be put aside for now. Thus, he said, then please go ahead and convince this junior. If he's willing to give up resisting, I can make the decision to pardon him. Ban and Gua heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. This meant that their lives were temporarily safe. The two of them bowed and retreated. Then, accompanied by Yi Hongtu and the others, they went to the place of the final battle. Wei Zihong knew that if there were no accidents, the battle would come to an end. He cupped his hands towards the pool in the hall and said, Venerable Black Tortoise, please go to the Chaos Realm and rescue Lord Ao and the others. As soon as he finished speaking, a wave of water floated into the sky. With a spin, it went into the realm of chaos. He looked at the place where the water light disappeared and suddenly remembered that there were still many monsters in the realm of chaos. This was still a threat. He thought to himself, these monsters are extremely powerful, and I don't know how many of them there are. It will be difficult to deal with them. I should report it and let my teacher deal with it. Just as he was thinking, he felt refreshed. Unknowingly, the pressure that had been lingering around him since he entered the world disappeared without a trace. It was as if a layer of shackles had been removed, and the whole world became clear. He let out a long sigh and looked up into the void. If there were no accidents, this world should be peaceful now. Chapter 1884. As Zhang Yan's mana continued to invade, he gradually occupied the last bit of the 1K star stream. Taoist 1K had completely lost control of it, but he did not immediately send the stolen Weili back to Busu Tian. Instead, he temporarily placed it in the 1K star stream. But at this moment, he seemed to have sensed something. He looked somewhere and saw that the qi was returning to the void's primordial sea. He changed his mind and did not pay much attention to it. He returned his attention to what was in front of him. At this moment, Taoist 1K's figure suddenly became a little erratic. Because there was no Busu Tian Weili to nourish him, he looked like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. In reality, it was far from this point. The key was that this person was not willing to die, otherwise he would have killed himself long ago. Zhang Yan looked at him. In the current situation, he could probably hold on for another 1,000 years, so there was no need to specifically think of a way for him to survive. His so-called obsession seemed to be to prevent others from entering the upper realm. There must be an important reason for this. But since this person was not willing to say it now, there was no need to force him. After retrieving the Weili, he would be able to peek deeper into Busu Tian. He believed that he would be able to learn more, and it would not be too late to ask questions then. But there was one place that he felt that he could not ignore. Just now, Taoist 1K wanted to move out, so there must be a way out. He was very interested in this. Where was this person going? Since that place could withstand the Busu Tian Weili, its foundation must not be shallow. It was either made of the same material, or it was a world that was not inferior to the 1K star stream. But he did not find such a thing in his senses. Fortunately, there were still clues to be found here. Back then, he had used his body of strength to intercept Taoist 1 Quebec. So even if he could not see where he was going, he should be able to calculate it. His eyes flashed as he focused on the void and tried to look over. Normally, it was not easy to observe the past and future of a mighty figure of the same level. Firstly, there was a limit to his mana, and secondly, a peer could easily confuse his own future. But these two limitations did not apply to him. His current realm of mana was endless, and he did not need to care about these things. And after Taoist 1K lost the Bushtian Weili, he was almost at the level of Fu Qingming back then. Perhaps he was still inferior, so he could not obstruct him now. After a short while, he found a secret location. What surprised him was that the location was related to Bushutian. But after thinking about it again, it made sense. Otherwise, how could such a Weili be here? He did not head there immediately as he did not know what Taoist 1K had planned. It would not be too late to head there after he had sorted out the matters outside. With a wave of his sleeve, Taoist 1K was captured by his mana. Then, with a thought, he returned to Bushutian. On the other side, Bai Wei and the others did not dare to stay in the 1K star stream after sensing that the situation was not good. Before Zhang Yan's mana completely engulfed the world, they retreated and returned to the primordial sea in the void. Zhang Yan's gaze then turned towards them, causing their hearts to tighten. However, after they successfully left, they couldn't help but relax. Since Zhang Yan didn't pursue them, it meant that they didn't have to worry about this anymore. It was just that they thought they had a chance this time, but in the end, it was all for naught. Bai Wei sighed and said, "Looks like that one did not succeed." In the end, he was still caught by that Taoist Zhang. Deng Zhang said, "But that person hasn't died yet. Things haven't come to an end yet." Heng Jing said, "So what? In the past, we have been hoping for the future. But this one lost, which means that the future has been cut off. That scene will probably never appear again. The future was always changing. If what they saw didn't appear, then it meant that the future had been cut off." Deng Zhang shook his head and said, "Demon Lord Heng Jing's words are wrong. Since that one did not die, then who can say that the future will not exist?" Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. Since this person was captured by Priest Zhang, there was no need to say what happened to him, so they didn't bother to look at him. After hearing his words, they sensed and noticed that there was still a bit of essence energy that hadn't dissipated. Deng Zhangyan said, "Perhaps there is one possibility. The fact that this person was able to survive might also be within his expectations." Qi Yao scoffed. These words were just to comfort himself. If everything was within this person's calculations, then why would he be forced by Taoist Zhang to such a state? However, they couldn't deny that this person still existed. It couldn't be said that the path was cut off. Bai Wei said, no matter what he wanted to do was stopped by Taoist Zhang. No matter what happens, it has nothing to do with us for now. It's better to keep a low profile and bide our time. The people of humanity can tolerate me once or twice, but they won't tolerate me any longer. Qi Yao said, that's fine. Then the three of us will bid farewell to the two of you. He Hingjing and Lan Su bowed. Then, their figures blurred and they returned to the spirit world. Bai Wei glanced at Deng Zhang and said, half sighing and half doubting, Exalted Sovereign Deng, don't be too stubborn. If some things are destined to exist in the future, then wouldn't it be useless for us to pay attention to them? When he finished, he bowed and returned to his own domain. Deng Zhang stood alone in the void. His eyes were dim, and no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, in Aochi heaven, most of the sects of 1K Alliance had given up resisting under Ban Engwa's persuasion. Only a few protectors of their sects and a few remained stubborn to the end. These people couldn't do anything at all. Very soon, they were wiped out by the disciples and cultivators of the sects who had turned against them. Among them, these natives contributed the most. When the last protector was blasted into dust by countless divine abilities and secret arts, a sense of loss rose in the hearts of all the natives of Quebec. At the same time, they could also feel that the omnipresent consciousness in the heaven and earth was gradually fading away. The descendants of the deities and monsters with profound cultivation knew that it was the mother of the void that was dying. This also meant that the natural order of this world had collapsed. In the future, what would replace it would be the principles and rules that the followers of the demonic gods followed. Just now, Zhang Yan returned to Qinghuan Palace. At this moment, he felt something in his heart. It was the report of his disciple, Wei Zihong. He said that the 1K Alliance had been pacified. However, the greatest threat of the ancient deities and monsters had not been pacified yet. He was afraid that they would come out to threaten the remaining people. However, he didn't know how many of them there were, and it was difficult for him to penetrate deep into the chaotic realm to exterminate them. Thus he asked how he should deal with them. Now, he could destroy all of these ancient deities and monsters with a single thought. However, there was no need to do so. After moving the Weili, the mother of the void had already disappeared. In the future, many domains would naturally produce spiritual opportunities. The void and the land would be separated, and the cracks would close. Everything would be overturned. The bloodline would only become weaker and weaker, and this would no longer be the mainstream. These ancient deities and monsters were originally in the chaotic realm. As long as no one awakened them, even if he didn't deliberately push them, they would gradually die out in the future. There was no need to kill them all. Moreover, these Xiong monsters could be used to train his disciples in the future. With a flick of his finger, a beam of spiritual light flew out of Qinghuan Palace and landed in Jiutai Palace City. As for the 1K star stream itself, there would be cultivators of the sects to manage and guard it. He would not interfere specifically. After this matter was settled, he sat on the jade platform and used his spiritual will to calculate repeatedly. He checked the territory that Taoist 1K had originally wanted to move the Weili. After confirming that there were no changes in this place, he shifted his gaze upwards. With a thought, he landed in a cave abode. He stood with his sleeves behind his back. Looking up, he saw a Taoist sitting cross-legged on the main table. It was not difficult to tell that it was also the remaining essence qi of a true yang cultivator. When this person saw Zhang Yan coming in, he was a little surprised. Then he understood and said, "In that case, that person didn't manage to move here?" Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "How should I address you, Taoist?" Exalted Lu Hua stood up and cupped his hands, saying, "I don't dare to." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Just now, I was fighting with that person. When he was no match for me, he tried to retreat to your place. I think the two of you must have been friends in the past." Exalted Lu Hua sighed. "The reason why I agreed to help him wasn't because of our friendship. I just wanted to resolve the karma of the past. I don't want to make things difficult for you. Zhang Yan smiled. The fight between him and Taoist 1K was a fight on the path of Tao. It wouldn't involve others. Moreover, this person didn't really interfere with him. If he really hindered him, Zhang Yan wouldn't let him off easily. He asked, Taoist Lu Hua, do you know the background of this person? Exalted Lu Hua replied, I'm just a wisp of essence qi of the original body. I only know the karma of the past, but I don't know his background. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. This answer was within his expectations. Taoist 1K should be able to deduce that he could find his way here by following this clue. If Lu Hua knew his background, there would be no point in hiding it. He asked, where is that world? Exalted Lu Hua sighed, it's just a broken world. Zhang Yan couldn't help but feel a little interested. He asked, why is it called a broken world? Exalted Lu Hua said, it's just that my original body and a few fellow Taoists cultivated the Tao in the past. However, we couldn't see the boundless realm. Therefore, a fellow Taoist suggested that we should work together to visualize this place. After sensing it, we could build a ferry and use it as a raft. Then we could go to the rumored chaotic upper heaven realm through it. Zhang Yan thought for a while and knew that as long as the true young cultivators believed in it, it would definitely appear. However, it couldn't surpass their own limits. However, since the chaotic upper heaven realm could sense it, it must exist. If they worked together to visualize it, it would be like building a ladder. After a long time of hard work, they might be able to build a ferry that would lead them to that realm. Of course, it wouldn't be that simple. There would definitely be a lot of tricks involved. However, that was the general idea. He raised his eyebrows and said, in that case, this broken world is the place that your original body and many other Taoists built? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.